and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
So there are a gabillion ways that we can break down Game 2. And there are multiple ways that we can assess blame, I guess, or pinpoint the things that went wrong for Indiana last night. And then there's the storyline of the officiating. And I know that this is not going to be popular opinion per se, but hear me out. I think the officiating was a bigger factor in Game 1 than Game 2. I'm not saying it wasn't, that there were not glaring weaknesses or bad calls in Game 2, but that didn't lead to New York out-rebounding Indiana in the second half. That didn't lead to, I thought, a continued passiveness of Pascal Siakam. That didn't lead to T.J. McConnell inexplicably not being in the game late, even though he continued to make really good plays and be the one pacer that perplexes New York. And that did not lead to the Knicks with basically, as I said last night, what do they have, 4 guys and like 2 guys on 3 wheels? And am I saying that the Pacers are not playing hard? I'm not. Am I saying that the Pacers are not aggressive? I'm not. I'm saying that New York is more aggressive and playing harder at this point. And New York has out-toughed Indiana. And when there are loose balls, 50-50 balls, offensive rebounds, or in the case of the Pacers, a needed defensive rebound, New York is making those plays. OG Anunoby left the game. I wondered if actually he needed mustard packets. I thought maybe that was the case. Maybe he just had a cramp in his hamstring. But he clearly was hobbled when he went to the sidelines and didn't return. Jalen Brunson missed a quarter, and you can't take advantage of either. And this is a team with and they already were down 1. They played like 5 dudes. Josh Hart's got time to go over and grab Reggie Miller's headset and start cussing into it. So I just thought last night there were a lot of things that we're going to talk about, including the continued storyline of the officiating, which I think will change once they come back now to Indianapolis. But missed opportunities, missed free throw, missed free throw, missed free throw, missed free throw, missed free throw in quarter number 4, and Indiana's down 2-love. Disappointing.
Well, and perhaps things will change more as well once the league is done reviewing the 78 calls and non-calls that were sent their way last night, too. So, yeah, I mean, look, you had 2 opportunities when the Knicks were shorthanded last night to try to take advantage of a wounded dog, if you will, and you couldn't do it. Jalen Brunson goes down, and yes, you're able to gain a little bit of separation, but not enough. A 10-point lead at half or wherever it was at the break is not enough in the NBA, regardless of who's out there. Today's 10-point lead is not safe. It's barely safe when it's a 15-point lead, especially when you have a team as efficiently as shooting from outside like the Knicks are. I agree with you, Jake. I don't think that it was necessarily a full-scale, they weren't trying, they weren't hustling. They were getting outworked by New York. And the part that was more frustrating to me is that your edge going into this series, and even more so now, with how short the rotation is for New York and how short it likely could be if OG Anunoby is unavailable for Game 3. Your advantage is you're a deeper team, you're able to keep bodies more fresh, and you should be the more aggressive team late. You have an 8 to 9-man rotation. 9-man rotation last night. Yet somehow, the group that is playing most of their starters 40-plus minutes a night looks like the fresher team. Looks like the team that has more energy, that has more edge. And the Pacers looked exhausted. They looked absolutely exhausted late in that game, and it can't happen. Maybe you want to chalk it up to adrenaline. Maybe you want to chalk it up to role players or starters like we saw in the Buck series playing that much better at MSG. And I will admit, and I think a lot of people that have been there before, I have not for a game, but we've talked to enough people that have, will admit MSG is one of those special arenas. Austin Crozier said it yesterday on this program. It just is. It lights a fire under people. And there's no doubt in terms of the connectivity of the Knicks and just the way they feed off that crowd, sure, that'll carry the day. It shouldn't carry the day to the point, though, that you're looking like, you're being presented like you got out-hustled. I didn't have a problem with the way Tyrese Haliburton started that game. I still felt like he was kind of passive in the second half. And outside of T.J. McConnell, Obi Toppin, and I apologize on Twitter because I omitted him. It's my mistake. Ben Shepherd, who was great last night yet again, as the rookie has been all playoffs long from beyond the arc. Outside of those guys, they looked lost. They looked exhausted. And it needs to change, obviously, starting on Friday, because otherwise you go into this vat of reevaluation of this roster. It's okay to lose a 7-game series. It's okay to be upset about that when you're a team that is still as young as the Pacers are. What I cannot stand for is it looking like, even if this might not be the case, looking like you're getting outperformed, out-hustled, out-hearted, whatever verbiage you want to use, by a team that is down player after player after player when you're the deeper team.
Now, the question becomes, is it not that Indiana is getting out-hustled, but rather that Indiana is getting manipulated by getting called for things and is apprehensive because they're getting away with less than is New York? That would be Rick Carlisle's contention. I know most people have heard most of this by now, but I want to play it again. Rick Carlisle last night after Game 2 on the officiating in the Pacers-Knicks series.
After Game 1, we always go through the film, and games where it felt like the whistles weren't balanced, and we pull the clips. There's a way you can submit them to the MDA office. In the playoffs, when you submit things, the other team sees what you submit. And so there were 29 plays in Game 1 that we thought were clearly called the wrong way. I decided not to submit them because I just felt like, we'd get a more balanced whistle tonight. It didn't feel that way. Couple examples. 5:08 of the third. The whole world knows that Haliburton's got a bad back. And Hart comes up and shoves him in the back. And it's all over Twitter right now because a few people have showed it to me. And JB DeRosa's looking right at it. You can see him. He's got vision of the play, and he shoves Ty right into the corner, and there's no whistle, right in the back. And so that was shocking, And there are many others, but I can promise you that we're going to submit these tonight. New York can get ready; they'll see them too. I'm always talking to our guys about not making it about the officials, but we deserve a fair shot, and it's just not. There's not a consistent balance, and that's disappointing. So, give New York credit for the physicality that they're playing with. But their physicality is rewarded and ours is penalized, just time after time. And so I'm just really disappointed.
Okay, there's a lot to take in there, including the last part, which I think is a fair statement. But I want to go to the 48-second mark in that clip again. And maybe I'm the only I'm curious because there are times in this show that sometimes I wonder to myself if I have to use you, the audience, as my barometer because there are times that arrows fly past me that I miss, and especially this time of year, there are a lot of things, a lot of moving parts to different stuff going on, and so I try to keep hold of everything and know everything that's going on, but some things I do think to myself, wait a minute, did I miss something? Was there an email do you guys ever have something at work where somebody's like, well, about Betty's get-together in the lunchroom at noon for her husband's birthday, and you're like, I missed that. What are you talking about?
All the time.
Did you not see the email? And you're like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, gosh, there is one there. maybe I missed something here. Eddie, let's go back to the 48-second mark in that clip and Rick Carlisle talking about Tyrese Haliburton and the Josh Hart push.
5:08 of the third. The whole world knows that Haliburton's got a bad back.
Okay, stop it. Use the Dick Vitale. Freeze it. I know that Tyrese Haliburton at timeouts wears that little brace on his back with the little shock sensor or whatever it might be. And I know that he had the hamstring or the quad injury from the slide that he took where he missed. Obviously, he had the grade 1 sprain or whatever it was listed as. But numerous people, myself included, after game 1 had asked what was going on with Tyrese Haliburton because his aggression and his offensive output had dipped so much in the latter part of the season, in particular, and into the playoffs. And the response always was, he's not hurt, guys. He's not hurt. He's dinged up. Everybody's a little dinged up, but he's not hurt. And I just thought it was, and I want to make clear here, by no means is this me like questioning or calling out Rick Carlisle as much as did he, in his frustration there, subconsciously just give us more information than what we've been told, because when he says the whole world knows he's got a bad back, there's a difference between having a nagging injury or a soreness or a tightness in your back and a bad back. And I'm totally putting myself out there to be told that I'm a complete moron. Is that a storyline that I've missed out on? And look, I want to make clear, I'm aware that he's on the injury and it lists back. I get that. I always just thought it was, he has tightness or soreness in his back. I'm not trying to make more out of it.
What it's been labeled.
What's that?
Back spasms has been primarily what it's been labeled as.
I'm not trying to make more out of it, but yet when that's the immediate defensive nature you go towards, expecting a protection or an it was a foul, but when you say, hey, it's even more egregious because he should know that Tyrese Haliburton has a bad back. Wait, what?
So this is off of Fox Sports injury history, and obviously since Eddie worked closer with the team, he can correct me on this. The first time back popped up in terms of language of Tyrese Haliburton and being injured was on April 6th. It then appeared again during the Bucks series and has pretty much been on the injury report ever since. So, I guess that's what he's referring to, because the whole world would know because it's on the injury report.
Right.
But outside of that, unless it's something deeper that he's alluding to with a Freudian slip, which I don't think that's what that was, I would assume he's just referencing the fact that
what I'm saying is before the narrative was that wasn't an issue, right? He's on there, but no, he's okay. I
maybe it was enunciated because of it looked so intentional of him pushing him directly in the back. Perhaps he felt like he needed to emphasize it more, because it was wild. He's not wrong. It was directly in the back.
No doubt. I'm not picking an argument about it at all. No question.
So perhaps the language is he's emphasizing the fact the whole world knew to point out that it was a dirty play by DiVincenzo. Maybe that's what
Josh Hart.
Or Josh Hart. Excuse me. My apologies. By Josh Hart. Perhaps that's what he's trying to emphasize there. I don't know.
But the Pacers sent the plays that are in question, including the phantom double dribble, and that becomes a whole different talk show but that's what we have here, so we can talk about it. When the double dribble was called on Hartenstein, and then they come back and say that was an inadvertent whistle. Well, it was an inadvertent whistle where apparently the oh shucks, when you make a mistake, if you're walking down the hallway at work and somebody's walking past you and they're carrying a file, okay, they got a big thing that they're carrying to go to their office, and you accidentally bump into them and the papers go everywhere, and they turn around and look at you, you put your arms up in a sarcastic nature like, whoa, wasn't me, right? Maybe the official's way of saying wasn't me, inadvertent, is to take your hands not in the upward motion, but rather side to side with one another and then oscillate them up and down as if you're calling a double dribble. Maybe that actually means, my bad, inadvertent whistle. Clearly a double dribble was called. Now, admittedly, he did not double dribble.
Correct. Just like the other night.
So it was the wrong call, but it was a subjective call that couldn't be overturned. If that's the case, then why in game 1 was the kicked ball that was not a kicked ball not able to be overturned? That's another question. But the Pacers are going to send these questions and these plays that they have questioned, these clips, to the NBA. The Knicks will see that, as Rick Carlisle said. basically the Pacers are saying to New York, okay, we let you get away with it, but now we're letting the teacher know that when you keep hitting us in the back of the room and we're the ones getting in trouble for it, we're tired of it. And they're standing up for themselves. But Brian Windhorst, of course, ESPN NBA insider, shared his thoughts on the Pacers submitting these plays to the NBA.
Through the night, the Pacers worked, and early this morning, they submitted 49 calls that they feel they were wronged about in Game 2. And while they were on the server, they slapped the other 29 calls from Game 1 to submit what they feel is 78 missed calls that went against them from Game 1 to Game 2. And by the way, the Knicks automatically get copied on that. So when the Knicks wake up, they're going to have 78 clips should they want to review them. Yes. And so what I think this is going on here, obviously they're trying to make a point, but my view is that the Pacers, looking at how banged up the Knicks are, they think this series is absolutely still in play, and they want to make the officiating a factor to help them going into Game 3.
Now, what we know is this. Indiana still needs to get a win in New York. And they're only going to have 2 chances left, and it's going to be difficult in a Game 7. So, therefore, basically now they need to perform a sweep. I mean, that's the easiest way to say it. And I think he's right. Indiana thinks that this, especially coming back home, you feel good if you hold serve, but you got to get one of them in New York. And that is going to be the challenge. But I think that this is Indiana's way of saying, because it is frustrating. As a Pacers fan, as the media that covers it, the eye test tells you that Indiana is getting out-hustled and getting outplayed. The other side of that could be, is it because they are pulling their hands back because they're getting the whistle's getting blown? I think it is irresponsible for us to automatically blame games on officiating. I just think it's amateurish, but at the same time, but at the same time, Indiana has to stand up for itself. Rick Carlisle has to stand up for his guys and say,
that's how it
look,
works.
All we're asking is for a 50-50. It's like a strike zone in baseball. Be consistent in what you are allowing and not allowing. The play, for example, where Jalen Brunson is driving down and he basically has collisions twice with McConnell, and then he scores and he gets an and one. I personally thought the left arm was giving himself separation as much as anything. And look, if I'm a New York radio station and I listen in to this program, I would say, see, there you go, the Indianapolis radio blaming the officials. No. Indiana put themselves in positions to let those things be a challenge for them. I don't believe they made a free throw in the fourth quarter, right? I mean, you can't go to the line when they got within one possession for like 8 straight possessions and couldn't capitalize, couldn't tie or take the lead. And when you're missing both ends of free throws on a 2-shot free throw, or you're missing the front end of a 1-on-1, it kills you. You can't get over that hump. You got to score the uncontested shots like that. It absolutely kills. And that's just I love Isaiah Jackson. But when he goes to the free throw line and he's shooting those free throws, and easy for me to say, I guess I'm not the one up there in this raucous crowd, whatever else. But like he just gets up there and it was like, whoa, like give yourself 5 seconds to kind of like set what you're doing here to shoot a free throw. Elementary stuff, basic stuff. But in addition to that, yes, the officiating maybe sets the tone on how comfortable Indiana feels they can be in their physicality. But physicality is not the storyline just in terms of overall. How many times did New York get second and third shots? They out-rebounded Indiana in the second half. They doubled them up. You can't have that. You simply can't have that, especially against a team that comes in and only uses 8 guys, and one of them is at the Carnegie Deli because he can't play. One of them sits out a quarter and then comes back on the 54-year anniversary of Willis Reed, so you knew that was going to happen. And then the other one didn't bring his mustard packets, and so he gets the hamstring cramp or whatever, and he's out. and is one of their difference makers. And now all of a sudden you literally you're playing against like 5 New York Knicks and 2 guys from the Albany Stuff. Got to take advantage.
Of their 5 offensive rebounds in the fourth quarter, 3 of them came with 6 minutes or less to play. 2 of them came in the final 4 minutes of the ball game, and the most crushing one was when the Pacers were kind of already, up a creek with it, down 6 with a minute to go, and once again they get out-rebounded by Precious Achiuwa. I mean, it's back-breaking stuff. I will say on the Rick Carlisle front, and he's getting some, I know he doesn't care, and I don't really care because he doesn't care, but he's getting some heat nationally. This is how it works in the NBA today. What he's doing. The idea of them sending 78 calls to the league, because it's human nature. Until you have, and it's never going to happen, I'm just using this as an extreme example, until you have robot referees in the sport, the human element of the way things are officiated is going to occur. And he's trying to plant that seed going into game 3. He has every right to do that. He should do that. And the part where I totally agree with you, Jake, is it can be a layered conversation. You could admit that officiating was a factor, that perhaps it dictated the way the Pacers were doing things defensively or offensively, the amount of aggression they were willing to put out there for fear of a whistle. The other side of the coin could argue, well, at that point in the game in the fourth, forget about the whistle, just go out there and, go full speed and come what may with the officials. But the other side of the coin is you did not do enough for a second consecutive game to push the advantage out of reach for both a furious Villanova Knicks, as they're calling them, rally, or did you do enough to take away officiating from potentially dictating the way things went?
Rick Carlisle has zero concern, nor should he, about what. Eddie, can you look up the name of the morning radio program in? Eddie, Jimmy, give me a city off the top of your head. Boom, go.
Seattle.
What's the name of the morning radio program in Seattle? I'm going to guess it's Kevin and the Kraken, right? Something like that. But what do we got?
Chuck and Buck in the morning.
Chuck and Buck.
Beautiful.
Hey, what's
That's
up?
beautiful.
It's Chuck and Buck. I know we used to be Charlie and Barney's, the chili spot in Broderville, but it's Chuck and Buck in the morning. Up next, Mariners. Are they going to get out of the skid or not? And Rick Carlisle, what's going on with the guy in Indy? Okay? I know it's supposed to be cloudy and rainy today in Seattle, but the rain and excuses in the Circle City. That up next on Chuck and Buck. Weather on the 9s. Okay, now, he doesn't care about what Chuck and Buck say. He doesn't care what Query and Company say. He doesn't care what Kevin 071385 on X/Twitter is saying. He doesn't care what people are posting on Facebook or Instagram or wherever else or TikTok. Rick Carlisle cares in terms of bringing the attention of the officiating. He cares about what 3 people think. 3. Because he's letting them know, okay, enough, guys. Enough. And in terms of sending the message to the NBA, he's not expecting the NBA to call and go, yeah, hey, Rick, this is Joe at the league office in compliance. Sorry to get back to you so late. You're actually up 2-0. He's not expecting that. He is simply laying the groundwork to say, okay, we have now a 5-game series where we need to win 4 or 5. We got to win 4 or 5 or we're done. And if we're going to go in and try to win 4 or 5, we simply want even footing in terms of, like in Hoosiers, when they say, I think you'll see that these rims are the same height as our gym back in Hickory. He just wants to know that the way it's being called, that the rims are the same height at Gainbridge Fieldhouse as they are. The benchmark is the same as it is in Madison Square Garden. That's all he's trying to do. And yeah, people might laugh at that and people might skewer him for it, and Chuck and Buck probably have a lot of fun with it in the morning. But that's what he's trying to do. And I get it. But at the same time, and I'm sure this is taking place, but it would be my hope that at the same time, he also is having his group take a look at New York's ability to extend possessions. And seemingly, whether it's true or not, I don't know. But there has to be a reason why everybody watching the game is looking at it and saying, gosh, it certainly feels like if you took anybody, some random American that doesn't give a hill of beans about who wins between the Pacers and Knicks but knows sports and hasn't paid a single bit of attention to this particular series, and you made them watch that game and said, okay, one of these teams, primarily, we're going to make you watch a 5-minute segment. One of these teams is going on playing basically 8 guys in rotation, and the other one goes 4 to 5 deeper than that. And one of them has not 1 but 2 frontline players that are out for the rest of the season. They would look at the energy level and the pace in which they're playing, and they would say, well, clearly that the team that's in the black and the blue jerseys in the white, clearly that's the one that has more energy. I'm not saying that Indiana's mailed it in, but in the last 2 games, New York has simply played harder, right?
They've been the more aggressive team. They've looked the fresher team despite having a shorter rotation. If you're looking for light at the end of the tunnel with this, and it stinks. Look, I'm never the guy that's going to support, that's going to root for, that's going to hope for injuries to hamper a series, right? A, that's bad karma, and B, it's an awful thing to do. But the facts are that there's a chance OG Anunoby might not play on Friday. And if he's out, yes, this has been an incredible ride the Knicks are on. But all of a sudden, and maybe Pacers fans think it was already, and they should have confidence to some extent going back to gamers. They've yet to lose there in the postseason. But if there's no Anunoby, you're asking more and more strain to be tightened up for the Knicks rotation. And at some point, either it's going to break and the Pacers are going to be able to capitalize, or the Knicks are going to be, this 2023-24 Knicks team is going to be viewed as one of the most resilient in Knicks history, certainly one of the most resilient playoff teams we've seen, and they're going to make a conference finals. But the table is set still for the Pacers. It's why Rick Carlisle and whoever he had help compile the clips took the time to send 78 of those to the league office, because they feel like this is still a winnable series. We can talk about later in the show where it's most winnable. I think I am less fearful, even despite everything that just happened in Game 1 and Game 2, of a Game 7 in New York than maybe I probably should be. But you can't put the cart before the horse there. What's on the line for you is to hold serve at home like you did against Milwaukee, and then figure out a way to win one in New York. But this is going to be potentially a third bite at the apple, Jake, where a star player or somebody's been hampered for New York. If Anunoby does not play, are they able to finally capitalize on it? Because to this point, they couldn't do it in Game 1. Yes, officiating played a factor, but they weren't able to do it then. And then Jalen Brunson leaves for a large portion of the first half, and the best you have to show for it is a 10-point advantage, and you get absolutely Mike Tyson punch-out haymaker in the third quarter.
Yeah, the third quarter was ugly, right?
It's disgusting.
26-5. That is the Knicks record with OG Anunoby. 30-29 this year without him.
Which leads to the question that someone asked me last night. And as I've done before to quote the CNC Music Factory, it made me go,
Is this a tinfoiled hat potential?
It's not actually.
We haven't used that in a while.
We haven't. But it does lead to a little bit of a tinfoil hat, maybe not a tinfoil hat, but a thinking cap in terms of looking towards the future for Indiana. And I'll explain what I'm talking about next.
Have you seen all the patio furniture at Sullivan?
This is essentially what New York did last night whenever they wanted. Not saying Indiana didn't, slow them down per se, but just in terms of running, I mean, look, New York gets out, they run. Indiana's the one, the Knicks going into the series, it was that Indiana wants to run the ball and New York's going to try to slow them down. Tom Thibodeau, defensive specialist, and New York just seems to be fresher. That's a better way of saying it. I don't know that I'd say that they're necessarily just flat out running, but man, in a quick run down the other end of the floor, it's can somebody please find, cover the corner? It's frustrating. And also frustrating is when OG Anunoby finishes the game with 28 and you realize he didn't even play for basically 30% of the game? And Pascal Siakam.
Yeesh.
Siakam started out in the Milwaukee series historically. Since then, 15% from three-point range, under 50% from the free throw line, 16 points a game.
I think he's even been under 40% from the line.
Yeah, it's 38, I think, right?
Yeah.
Think about the two players that I just named. OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam. Hindsight's 50-50, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. I get it. But both of them were available in Toronto, obviously, because they began the year as teammates in Toronto, and now they're on opposite teams in the Eastern Conference semifinals. And it's easy to say, did Indiana acquire the wrong Raptor? But the deeper question is this, and maybe it's dangerous to form this answer based on a 2-week window. And I think one of the things that executives in professional sports get credit for that we don't give them enough credit is playing the long game. Not being knee-jerk reactionary about everything. You think about fantasy football. If you're a fantasy football player and you're how often do you see in fantasy football in week number 1 some wide receiver that nobody'd heard of that has some incredible game where he goes out on Monday Night Football and for the Chargers gets 110 yards in receiving and 2 touchdowns. And then all of a sudden, and he's some undrafted free agent out of Chico State, and now all of a sudden, and then boom, everybody goes out and you look at the ESPN.com and they're 92% of players made a transaction to acquire Jimmy Cook from Chico State that had the 110-yard 2, and then the guy never does anything else again, and everybody knee-jerk reacted, right?
That's why you're saying they blew their entire free agent auction budget out of the gate in week 1.
Yes. And professional sports executives, their job is to evaluate things in totality and not in a vacuum. So maybe what I'm about to say is why I'm a sports talk show host and not an executive. And I think Pascal Siakam is a wonderful player. And there have been times this year, and in particular, obviously in Milwaukee, when he gets going where he is an almost unstoppable player offensively. But his offensive areas of being unstoppable can be limited at times. And, right now, his game basically is back to the basket and then turn around, fade away, 12-footer. When that's going, it's really good. Don't get me wrong. But considering his age, what did we say he is, Jimmy? 30?
30. Just turned 30.
And considering what he wants, probably a max deal. The Pacers are in a bit of, and it's a good problem to have versus bad, don't get me wrong, but they've got a decision to make. Because Siakam, in order to stay here, is going to want close to max money, if not max. And his career probably dictates that he's worth that to this point. but you're paying for the introduction, one would assume, just based on the law of averages. You're paying for the introduction to the downslide of a guy's career. I'm not saying a fall off, but the beginning at some point within that 4 or 5 year window that you're going to sign him, theoretically, you're going to be paying for a reduced production. Do you put yourself in position where you financially overcommit because right now you need what is thought to be like that the two-headed horse, and he and Haliburton, and we'll get to Haliburton in a minute. But that's a decision they have to make. And Jimmy, the other thing that complicates that to an extent is whether or not this is the kind of thing that Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan truly invest in on or look at and scrutinize. The reality is that part of, even though I think at this point the trade for Pascal Siakam and the release is not the right word, the trade of Buddy Hield, I think it's paid off, and I think at this point people understand, like, okay, yeah, I get it. But there still is that thought process of, do they need to retain him in order to totally validate the move that they made? And if that's the case, do they then have to have a hard cap on how much they pay him based on the production reduction and the fact that he is about to turn kind of that magical age where guys naturally and inevitably start to lose a little bit? Those are questions they got to answer, right?
It's a difficult bridge to walk across because you are correct. You have to make sure you're getting the highest value for the franchise in this. And I hesitate here because we're operating underneath, and I'm still operating underneath this presumption that Tyrese Haliburton is your franchise player moving forward, and you want to build around him. Tyrese is still relatively young. So in theory, you're looking at what? Probably 2 windows, maybe 3 over the course of Haliburton's career. And you would argue this is the first window of that. So you have to weigh your costs initially for who do you want to run with him in this first window. The second observation would be, yes, you gave up assets to acquire Pascal Siakam. Granted, the first round picks that you gave up were 2024 first round picks. So it's not like you've handicapped yourself like some other franchises have done over the years. When you think of the most notable example the last 15 years would be the Brooklyn Nets when they went out and got Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and company, and they sold first round picks for the next decade pretty much to the Boston Celtics. Like, you're not in a boat like that. But it would still be a tough pill to swallow to have to say, you know what, maybe this is not the right direction for the franchise. That said, I still look at where they're at and what would potentially be available to them in free agency and the idea of selling Indiana. Yes, I do believe players want to play for Tyrese Haliburton. But
why not Indiana?
It should be on a sign somewhere on a T-shirt.
That's right.
Surprised it's not in the Jake Query patent office.
Let me tell you something right now. If you're thinking of doing that, just be forewarned. It's already trademarked. It's already trademarked. Don't try. Yeah, that's right.
I feel like Siakam, at least for a half of a season that we were able to see him, wants to be here. I feel like he is still an excellent player, but I will admit it is concerning how he's taken what was initially the guy behind the wheel, viewed as a 1A, 1B to Tyrese Haliburton. He is comfortable sitting in the back seat since game 1 of that Milwaukee series. And we talk about Tyrese Haliburton needing to be the better player and rising to the occasion like he did for a half and some of the fourth quarter last night. You haven't seen that at all from Siakam, and he's kind of dodging those, for lack of a better phrase, he's dodging those darts because everything's been focused on Haliburton, because you know he's the long-term franchise player. Siakam hasn't played that great either. To your point, though, about OG, there's a bit of a pass for me there in regards to, I know it's just conversation, I know you weren't saying this, but the question, Jacob, did they get the wrong Raptor? There's more you can fall back on if you're the Pacers because the fact that OG was traded first. He gets moved in December. He gets moved for 2 players that arguably, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, probably better than anything the Pacers would have been comfortable offering. and they also sent a second-round pick.
Right.
And the Pacers was more towards the Raptors finally being all in on it being a rebuild for them. Because if you recall, at the time, going into the season, the Raptors still weren't sure if they wanted to blow the thing up. They really liked Anunoby, and they appreciated what Siakam did for them.
The other thing about Anunoby, and New York's finding this out right now.
The injuries, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Hard to keep him healthy, right? I think Siakam's a very good player, and I think that it has – look, I mean, it accelerated Indiana's timeline a little bit, but –
don't you feel like you're forced to take the chance and re-sign him? Because you look at the free agent market and having to go through that process of reselling this thing, or versus just letting him walk and trying to resell it, who do you replace him with? Who fills that void?
Right. Not to mention you gave up the draft capital for him.
Correct. It was, like I admitted, short-term capital, but it's still capital all the same.
Now that leads to the other side, which is Tyrese Haliburton, that you now know is locked in on a max contract. And we assume, and I actually like that Rick Carlisle said earlier, the whole world knows he's got a back problem. And I know that Haliburton has talked before about how he's had back problems. But, and maybe that's something that never fully goes away, which is concerning if that's the case. But what I'm getting at is, for and with Haliburton's case, you know that you're about to start paying big time bucks. And if you're paying that kind of big time bucks to a guy, and I'm not saying this can't be resurrected, he's still a young player, and this is his first bite at the apple in terms of the playoffs. But he's got to know and he's got to learn that when it comes to the playoffs, whether it's fair or not, whether it's just or not, whether it's designed or not, whether it's schematic or not, when you are a max contract player that a franchise and a city have rallied around and you become the face of your franchise, with that comes the responsibility, even though your natural instinct offensively is to be a distributor and a facilitator, you have to be more aggressive in getting yourself shots when the game is on the line. Jalen Brunson's cool with it. And Haliburton, and he has the ability, obviously, to get himself to the basket, but he does look now like a guy that is starting to think from his outside shot a little bit like it's in his head. And he's starting to do, again, my favorite quote in sports, Juan Montoya to me about the Indy 500, don't overthink it. And sometimes I think that when he's playing, that Haliburton looks like he's overthinking it, right?
And he had both sides of that last night. The first half, I didn't think there was any overthinking. I thought he was just playing his game. I think Eddie Gill said it on the radio broadcast last night. He looked like the Tyrese Haliburton that we saw in November and December. And then in the second half, he only has 10 points. It's a very quiet 10. Granted, I will admit they did come in the fourth quarter, so you at least like to see that within crunch time. I was very hard on Tyrese Haliburton in game one. I'm less frustrated with him after game two because he did what he said he was going to do, albeit for a half of basketball. He responded.
I'll give you that.
Over.
But late in the game,
sure,
when they needed baskets,
he was too passive.
That's when you need it, right?
Yeah, correct. He was too passive. It should not dwarf, though, the out-hustle effort questions that were still present. A lot went wrong in that fourth quarter. But if you're the franchise player, which I think we all think he can still be and is, you have to wear that criticism. And the passive nature late in that game continues to carry the day, despite the fact that if you're getting punked by Precious Achiuwa, man, I can't help you. Like, he was a throw-in piece for the Anunoby trade. Like, that's what you're looking at. If Anunoby is hurt, you're looking at more names like that of guys that would not be in a playoff rotation for any meaningful team. And if that's not enough to motivate you to not go out there and get punked, I can't help you.
By the way, Chris Denari going to join us top of the hour. We'll take a couple comments as well on the other side on what you folks think. Are we properly voicing your frustrations, or are people even more PO'd than we're displaying today? We'll get into that next.
For the biggest selection of Mother's Day gifts, shop Cynthia's Hallmark at
Top of the hour, 239-1070, the telephone number. One of the things that we'll talk about with him that Eddie and I were just discussing in the break, and it is an easy thing to overlook, but a valid point. How much could the Pacers right now use the toughness of Benedict Mathurin? And, you know, in particular, in grind-out offensive possessions, that's kind of his strength. There are other areas that I wonder if Mathurin – I don't know how to say this. Like, I feel like sometimes offensively, Mathurin's one of those guys that I'm still not convinced that he gets his points within rhythm of what it is offensively that they're designed to do in the core of how they want to play in the playoffs. But we'll get more into that later.
I would argue that, though, Jake, on one point and say that there are times where that style of game where it's just me, give me the ball,
right? Isolation.
That would help to counter out Brunson. But your point is valid. It would mess up some of what they want to do.
There's your get out of the way guy.
Correct.
Get the hell out of the way guy.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, he may be, right? Luke joins us. What's up, Luke?
Hey, Jake.
How are you? Luke, are you a Lucas or are you just Luke, straight up?
So actually, Luke is my middle name, and it is just Luke, not biblical or anything, just because my parents are Star Wars fans. Right there.
How's your sister Leia doing?
She's doing okay.
I'll bet you've never been asked that before, have you?
No, that's not usually the follow-up question. I appreciate that, Jake.
All right, what's going on, Luke?
So I wanted to just say, I know there's a lot to be disappointed in from this next series. It's not fun to lose in a playoff series, but, I feel like there's still a lot of things to be hopeful for in the future as a Pacers fan. I was going back and watched those 2 games in a row where Tyrese Haliburton had 20 points and 20 assists earlier today, and I'm excited to see how he can come into next season. I know he's going to be doing a lot with the Olympics over the off season, but hopefully he can take that time to learn from some of the best players in the world that he's going to be teammates with. So that's all. I know it's not fun to lose, but I think there's still a very bright future in Indiana.
I appreciate it, Luke. And dare I say, no, I'm not going to say it, but I appreciate it. And good point about Haliburton. I know that there was also the hope and the expectation during that process that maybe he'll be able to lure more players to Indiana. We shall see. Patrick's up next. Hey, Patrick, what's up?
What's going on, guys? What's going on, guys?
We're well. Patrick, where are you? Are you driving right now?
Yep, just pulling back into work from lunch.
Got the turn signal on? What road are you turning off of there? And we're thankful that you're pulling into a parking lot. Please be careful while on the phone. Where are you driving? You're coming off what road?
86 in Georgetown.
Okay, traffic okay?
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, good. Weather okay outside? We're landlocked here. Everything look okay?
It is ugly out, and it keeps spitting, but it's not that bad.
Okay. All right. Well, what's on your mind, Patrick?
So, here's the thing. I know it's a conspiracy theory and everything, but all game long yesterday, there was illegal screens on TJ McConnell, at least 4 or 5 that I counted that they didn't even call, but they called the most ticky-tack one in the first game. That's number one. Number two, TJ McConnell needs to be in at the end of the game. He's shutting down Brunson. He's actually playing hard defense against Brunson. And number three, the reason why Tyrese in the fourth quarter of the past 2 games has had turnovers is because they know he's not looking for his shot. There's been multiple times where he's driven the lane, and they're not playing to defend his shot. They're playing to defend a pass because they know he's going to pass. First half, they weren't blocking and defending his shot at all because they assumed that he was going to pass, and that's why he was making shots. He needs to be the aggressive player that we know that he can be. TJ needs to play more, and the refs need to be investigated, and that's all I got to say.
I like the investigative part, by the way.
Well, they got 78 calls to investigate.
It's going to be a while, right? Going to be a while. I mean, which happens first? The NBA actually gets through all 78 of those, or you guys see Shawshank Redemption?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Well, that's all on you, buddy. That's all on you.
How's that on me?
I believe you told us that we are not to watch it because you will invite us over for PBR or Diet Cokes.
Here's the thing.
And to watch that shit.
That all works except for it's going to be a while now because it's going to be on a weekend, right? Probably. And mine are all now, until basically Independence Day,
we wanted to
which
watch
is a terrible movie.
We wanted to watch it with you, and hear me out here. Do you think if we asked JMV to come with us, that Shanna would let us go watch it with her? I know we want you there, but
listen,
at the cost of seeing the movie.
We've got the dogs here. I'd rather you not have the guys come over.
JMB wanted to come too. There's a boarding place I could take.
By the way, I want to get to this really quick. Ian Begley of SNY in New York reporting on OG Anunoby that there's no official word from the team yet on his health status, but late Wednesday night there was pessimism internally about his availability for Game 3 of Knicks-Pacers on Friday. That pessimism remained earlier this morning as Anunoby's sore hamstring is feared to be more than just a cramp.
He needs mustard.
He does need mustard. Can I get tinfoil hat really quick? I know we got to go to break, but just to build off of that report. Vegas must know, because the line itself was -5 last night. It's now -7 in favor of the Pacers. So the truth is out there. Just got to find it.
Okay. I'm telling you, he needs the mustard packet, but don't tell him that because we don't necessarily want him healthy. Chris Denari next.
Everyone's talking about Galaxy Concrete.
The two biggest concerns I have for the Indy 500, actually the biggest concern I have every year for the 500, is securing my route into the race. That is a common sentiment amongst attendees of the greatest spectacle in racing. I should give fair warning. Is it fair warning or forewarning? Which is it? Forewarning?
Right? Yeah.
You forewarn someone of something, but then you give also a forewarn, right? So I'd like to forewarn people right now.
Couldn't you just say you're just warning people?
I'd like to warn people. If you are tomorrow night around 7:30-ish on 16th Street heading towards downtown, which then gets loopy because there's all kinds of construction over by the old Busch Stadium, I think. But there's going to be like a whoosh that goes by. And that's going to be, and I don't know if it's going to be one car or two, but Chris Denari and I are going to be moving our way from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, calling action on the road course. As soon as the checkered flag falls on the Indy Next race, both of us then heading over to Gamebridge to watch Game 3 between the Pacers and Knicks. And listen, bat out of hell more than just a Meatloaf album. I can tell you that. He joins us now on the program. He's the television voice of the Indiana Pacers. Chris Denari joins us. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, that's what happens when you become just a spectator in the second round and you don't do the game. So I'm just like anybody else, and it works out that I can do IndyCar stuff this weekend and during the month. I'd love to be doing Game 3 on TV, but that's not to be.
Chris, I'm going to begin with this in terms of the Pacers offense. And one area where I've been disappointed is maybe the wrong word. That's a little patronizing, but surprised, I'll say that, is it feels like maybe it's what New York is doing. I mean, you would know better than I because you obviously watch this team every possession, every game throughout the course of the season in totality. Is there something that New York has done to kind of take away from Pascal Siakam being a more aggressive offensive player and obviously his production, while still productive, not the level that we saw against Milwaukee?
Yeah, I mean, he had two 30-point games in the first two games, and he still averaged better than 25 points per game. You go through stretches where you don't shoot the ball as well. I mean, I think from an offensive standpoint, I mean, the Pacers have shot better than 50% in each of the first two games against the Knicks. They made 15 threes last night. They shot 44%. So, from an offensive end, while there might be some issues, I wouldn't say it's glaring. They only had 9 turnovers. So from an offensive standpoint, I think they've been pretty effective. Now, Pascal last night was 7 of 18, 14 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists. He has struggled at the free throw line probably the last few weeks. But, I think things can turn. You get back home, you find a different rhythm. I mean, he's the same guy that was the Pacers' leading scorer over the back half of the season, and the same guy that had 36 and 37 against Milwaukee. So, I think he has a better than average chance of regaining that form for Game 3 on.
Do they do something, or do they tweak something, Chris? And if so, what would you guess it would be to get that form returned for him?
No, I don't. I mean, I just think, this is an offense that is predicated on random. And from random, it is move the ball, find the open guy, make the ball work for you. I mean, they had 33 assists on 48 field goals. I think offense, is not an issue. I mean, they scored 121 points last night. The problem is they gave up 130. I think they'd be comfortable against the Knicks in the 120 range. So, no, I just think it's, I thought Pascal, he missed a couple at the rim. I mean, they weren't even the turnaround jump shots that are his patented shots. He missed a couple with contact at the rim. Those are 2 or 3 of his 11 misses last night. He makes 2 or 3 of those, he's got a 20-point night. So I just think you keep getting him the same shots, and more often than not, he's going to be highly effective.
Chris Denari is our guest, TV voice of your Indiana Pacers. Chris, there's a lot of layers to being a coach in any sport, but especially at the highest level of basketball in the NBA. I've always viewed Rick Carlisle as the type like the rest of us where, it's not worth often. The juice is not worth the squeeze of complaining about officiating because of fines that'll be levied, the fact that, it often doesn't fully change things. With that said, how big of an exclamation point is Rick Carlisle going out there last night, highlighting they're going to send clips, 78 clips being sent to the league office? How big of an emphasis of that is, no, this is something important, if nothing else, to make sure that you're standing up for your guys while also playing into the human element of once you plant a seed with a crew, perhaps it will pay dividends for you moving forward?
Well, we always see that in sports, I think, coaches trying to plant a seed and seeing if things would change. I mean, I'm not around the team now. I don't travel on the road in the second round like I have been in the past. So it's hard for me, being away from the matter, knowing exactly what his mindset is. But I can tell he was frustrated, and it dated back to game one. And then, you look last night, he was so frustrated over the double dribble call that they made and then they took back. And I think his reasoning is, well, gee, you made a kicked ball call in the first game, but you didn't take that back. So, and again, two different crews, two different crew chiefs, but I just think he's trying to, let people know he has the back of his players. I think to a man, just like they did in game one and in game two, they know there were plenty of other things that they could have done to win the game. But it's something that he felt he needed to get off his chest, and he did.
Chris, in terms of Chris Denari, the television voice of the Indiana Pacers, is our guest. T.J. McConnell's been really good, and so what I'm about to ask is no slight to T.J. McConnell, right? But the narrative, from myself included, is, hey, maybe they need to give T.J. McConnell more late fourth quarter looks, look at how well he's able to get to the basket, et cetera, et cetera. Is part of that, though, because New York does something differently in terms of their approach when he is on the floor that they're not doing with Haliburton or vice versa, and so it's a little bit skewed, if that makes sense what I'm asking?
Well, I don't think you have to take Haliburton. Haliburton's not going off the floor, but you could potentially have TJ with Tyrese like you see in the first half.
And they did do that a little bit last night, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've tended to do that a lot more. Rick has gone to the bench early in the first quarter, about halfway through, to get Siakam off the floor and some rest because he comes back and plays with the second unit. So right around the 6 or 7 mark, that first time out, you usually see TJ McConnell and Obi topping in, and they're playing with starters, and it's usually Nesmith and Turner and Haliburton. So I don't think there's any issue at all with playing Ty and TJ together, and that is something that I think Rick addressed in the postgame last night, that he's going to look at that. His coaching staff will look at that. Part of it comes from an offensive standpoint. TJ was highly effective again last night. He was 5 for 9 from the field. He had 10 points and 12 assists, and I thought did a credible job on Jalen Brunson. I think on the defensive end, the thing that I've noticed is you get in trouble when you're doubling and paying too much attention to Jalen Brunson. And the Pacers have been hurt by key three-point shots by DiVincenzo. Hart hit a big one last night in the second half. OG Anunoby hit some. I was looking at some numbers, guys. Over the last 25 games, Jalen Brunson has averaged 35 points per game. So it's not just what he's done against the Pacers or not just what he's done against Philadelphia in the first round. He's been doing this all March and April. And there's a tendency for me to think, man, I'd rather just see him get a 2 than kick it out to an open DiVincenzo for a 3, because I think those three-point shots have really been game changers in the last 2 games. If you look back, the 3 that DiVincenzo hit after the so-called kick ball was huge, and he hit a big three-point shot again last night. So I'm more concerned about that over-help situation. I think we're all taught that you want to help, but sometimes you can over-help. If you're not going to double, you over-help, and that leaves somebody open, and the Pacers have paid for it in the first 2 games.
Chris, one of the things to me that's been surprising through 2 games, Chris Denari is our guest, by the way, on the always busy and shockingly unsponsored guest line, and that is we thought going into it that New York, just based on Tom Thibodeau, I mean, you go on reputation, right? That New York was going to want to slow it down, and that the faster they were playing, or if it got into the 110s, 120s, advantage Indiana. Yet they've been able to score at that clip, but not get a win in either game. Obviously, it's concerning you're losing, but is that surprising, and or how concerning to you is that going into Game 3?
Well, it might be a little surprising, but if you're going to play a fast pace, you're probably going to get it run back in your face, and that's what the Knicks have done. They've shot it very well. They shot 57% last night, 47% from three. The question is, as you keep going forward, what bodies are they going to have available? I think Brian Windhorst reported, on OG Anunoby, we don't know what his availability will be tomorrow night, let alone for the rest of the season. But one of the things they said is because Tom Thibodeau plays guys so much, I don't think OG Anunoby had ever played this amount of minutes in a stretch of games in his career. And you just wonder, did that affect that hamstring as he was sprinting down the floor? So that's going to be something to watch. But I give the Knicks a lot of credit. I mean, Josh Hart, he's one of those guys, if he's on your team, you love him. If he's against you, you don't like him very much. But he went for 19, 15, and 7 in 48 minutes last night, and he's a guy that I think enjoys pushing the pace. So I think the Pacers have to figure out a way to deal with him if he's going to do these types of things that he did in the first two games.
Chris Denari is our guest, TV voice of the Indiana Pacers with Bally Sports Indiana. Chris, we mentioned this at the top of the show. A listener called in and brought up the same thing, and I want to clarify it on the front end. I think that Tyrese Haliburton, Rick said it last night, is dealing with stuff. I know everybody's banged up at this point in the postseason, but I believe that the totality of the hamstring in the back has hampered him to a point where you can see the numbers dip from where they were to start the year to where they are now. But I saw him be an aggressive player. I saw him be a balanced scorer and passer for half a season. So I know it's there. But when you see Tyrese Haliburton, there were a couple instances last night where the Knicks are offering no real respect for his drive. They're almost hanging back, waiting for the pass because he loves to make the extra pass, either to somebody up top or in the corner from beyond the arc. Is that mentality of always looking out for your teammates capable of being modified just a smidge to the point of, Tyrese, you need to put your head down and try to go get a bucket? Or is that asking too much out of something that worked so highly for such a large portion of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think last night we saw more of the Tyrese that we saw earlier in the year. I mean, he hit 7 threes. He was 11 of 19 from the field.
First half, he was awesome, right? He was absolutely awesome.
First half, he was excellent. I mean, second half, and I thought he was better in the fourth quarter. I think he wants to be cognizant of the fact of not taking bad shots, not shooting your team out of it. But at the same point, you want him to be aggressive. And so I just think that's, to me, it's also a learning curve. You're in the postseason, you're in the playoffs for the very first time, and you're trying to figure out, how do I get my teammates involved, but at the same time, how do I have that killer mentality, if you will? And so I just think that's a dance that sometimes can be tricky. But I liked what I saw last night. I just thought, he was the key. When the Pacers fell behind by 11 early, they scored 11 points in less than a minute, and a lot of that was because the pace was pushed by Tyrese. He was scoring from three. He was getting to the basket. So, it's something that you want to see continue. I'm a big believer this can be a long series, and to me, that's advantage for the Pacers. Now, you've got to win the next two games at home to turn it into that type of series, but I tend to look at it, and Jake knows me pretty well. I'm pretty much a glass half full guy, and I look at it and say, you were in position to win two games. Yeah, you didn't win, and that hurts, but you were in a tough environment. You had 9-point lead in the fourth quarter in game one. You had a 12-point lead in the fourth quarter in game two. I know you didn't close, but I think you can come home and build on that and really do a good job of getting this series back even, and then putting the pressure back on the Knicks for Game 5.
Hey, Chris, which Denari rescue dog was that in the background making a cameo?
I think it was Augie.
So
I think it was
because I
think it was Augie.
I want to let people know when it comes to, and I'm not saying that people don't need to be careful and do their background work. I get that, but when it comes to rescuing shelter dogs or dogs like that, we're talking about aggression with the Pacers, but your dogs don't have that at all, right? They're like the biggest sweethearts in the world, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Augie and Izzy, we've had them about 2 years. They are bonded together. So if I think my wife was coming in the door, and so Augie heard that, and he was excited.
Yeah, he's excited to get his fresh refill of Connecticut water. I know it works, right? Chris Denari is our guest joining us here on the program talking about the Pacers. Chris, in terms of coming back now to Gainbridge Fieldhouse, do games get called differently based on a home team? I know that's probably a dangerous question, but it does feel like you knew going into New York that things were going to be tough. And I think that Rick Carlisle, to go back to what we talked about at the outset of the conversation, kind of planted the seed, right? Okay, guys, you got away with 2 of them in that regard, but it's going to be different now. Do they change their aggression or the way they play based on an expectation of that happening?
Well, think back to when you watched games at North Central High School when I played at Westfield. I mean, I think my dad was hopeful that the officials – when you're at home, you're going to get some more favorable calls. Simon Scott Assembly Hall, Hinkle Fieldhouse. I mean, if you've grown up around the game, life is usually about the home team gets a friendlier whistle because you've got an animated crowd, all those kinds of things. So there's no question. I mean, that's what you hope. That's the game of basketball. You hope that you create some opportunities to get favorable whistles. And I think the environment will be tremendous on Friday and Sunday. I mean, this is a chance, again, for Pacers fans in a Knicks-Pacers rivalry to bring some heat. And this team has appreciated it. I mean, the one thing I've said is they've won 8 straight at home, the last 5 in the regular season and the 3 games against Milwaukee. And I think the last time they had won 8 straight, whether it be playoffs or regular season, is sometime back in 2012, 2013. So this team has played well during the month of March and April at home, and I expect that to continue starting tomorrow night.
Chris, last night after the game, Chris Denari, our guest, when Rick Carlisle was talking about the officiating, and I mean, it was a blatant no call of Josh Hart pushing Haliburton in the back. And Rick Carlisle had said, the whole world knows that Tyrese Haliburton has a bad back. And I know that he's been listed on the injury report with a back issue, and I'm simply asking for clarification because I think I'm guilty of maybe not being totally dialed in or paying attention to that. How long has Haliburton, I think he has said that he's always kind of had back issues, but how long has he been dealing with that? And is it limiting him?
It's hard to tell. I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, I think he's been dealing with it, probably the back half of the year. You see him on the bench with that.
Yeah, the brace.
The sort of the brace or a heating pad or whatever it is. I don't know exactly what that is, but it is something he has said that he's had some issues over the years, dating back to high school with some back spasms, those types of things. And, I don't know to the extent of what they are, but I clearly – was watching Rick's presser last night, and when I watched the game live, I'm thinking, how is that not a foul? And so I think Rick just wanted to get that out there again to put the spotlight on what he thought was not a good call, and hopefully that can be cleaned up moving forward.
Chris, it's clear that the Pacers' MO throughout the season, with the pace that they play at, they want to break teams. They want to just pound you into submission with how fast they're going to go. And it does not matter what you do on your end offensively. More points are going to be scored at the end of the day. That is the name of the game. And one could argue, you brought it up earlier, based on how Tom Thibodeau likes to coach his teams, short rotations, maximizes starters as much as he can, that perhaps that's happening right now. Jalen Brunson's gotten hurt. OG Anunoby's gotten hurt. I think the trend is Brunson will play on Friday. No, it's not official yet. It sounds like he will. But Anunoby's status is up in the air. So you can make the argument maybe it is working in that regard of wearing them down. But you still see last night where Hart, DiVincenzo, Brunson playing exuberant minutes and still having somehow energy left in the tank. If the concept of breaking them or outpacing them does not work, what then? Is there an adjustment that can be made to modify the script a bit to turn the tide back to the Pacers?
Yeah, I don't think you don't want to slow it down. I mean, that's not the Pacers games, and we've seen, the strength of New York is its play with force. I mean, I think the Pacers, the effort has been there. In my opinion, the hustle has been there, but maybe not playing with enough force, especially in the fourth quarter. Getting those defensive rebounds. I thought there were 2 or 3 last night that were situations where the Pacers were there and tipped it, but it tipped to the wrong guy. Hartenstein that's his strength. I mean, that's why he's on the floor. So I don't think you want to delve back into New York's game. So give New York a lot of credit. In the first 2 games, they played at a higher pace than usual, and they've been able to withstand the Pacers on their home floor. I want to see what happens when the Pacers have the Knicks on their home floor. Do they still have that adrenaline rush that lets you fight through the fatigue in playing so fast? Because, T.J. McConnell will tell you the home floor, especially at Gainbridge Fieldhouse and during the playoffs, during those Milwaukee games, meant everything to this group. So, that's the beauty about sports. I think that's the great thing about the NBA playoffs. The games are played on home floors, not neutral sites, and the home crowd can have a huge effect. And, I heard you guys talking about it. I've had the privilege over the last 18 years to broadcast games from Madison Square Garden, whether they be regular season, and I've been at the playoffs back in 2013. It's an unbelievable place when the Knicks are good. And when the Knicks are rolling, that place is as good as any place I've ever been. And so that's what I believe the Knicks have been dealing with. Let's see what they can do when they come to Indianapolis.
Chris, lastly, I think you know this, one of my favorite guys on the roster is Isaiah Jackson. I just think that he brings a different element of things. Have you been surprised at the amount of rotation he's gotten, and what do you think is the reason that Rick Carlisle has gone with him over, say, a Jalen Smith who saw a lot of minutes against New York in the regular season?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what they would do. I thought that they would have to add another big body, to the rotation. It was a lot different than the Milwaukee series because Milwaukee had Brook Lopez and then was playing Bobby Portis as a backup 5 or Danilo Gallinari. So it was a lot different series. So I figured that it would either be Jalen Smith or Isaiah Jackson. And, from a coaching perspective, the staff feels right now it's Isaiah Jackson is the best answer. And he's done a really nice job. I mean, I had some numbers back during the regular season when he was getting at least 10 to 12 minutes a game. I mean, he was putting up some pretty impressive numbers. So it's really good to see a guy like that produce so well off the bench in the playoffs.
Chris, we enter now the 3-week period where you and I are coworkers and colleagues. You fired up?
I'm ready to go. I mean, it's for me, it's stepping into something I don't do a lot of, but I will definitely be ready when it comes my way.
So are you going to bring your filing cabinet of information, which always impresses me, of like all the drivers, cars, teams, colors, etc.?
Well, I think I told you I was at my son and daughter-in-law's house at 5:45 this morning to be there for my grandson as my daughter-in-law had to go to work. And so I had my laptop with me, and from probably 6 a.m. to 8, that's what I was working on, Jake. So we'll see how well I did.
Chris and I are two ships passing in the night. 5:45, wake up for him. 5:30, shut it down for me. Right? That's how it works. Chris, appreciate it. I'll see you out there tomorrow. As a matter of fact, we'll be calling action, getting ready for the Sancio Grand Prix on Saturday. So I'll see you out at the Speedway.
All right, thanks, Jake. Thanks, Jimmy.
Chris Denari, the television voice of the Indiana Pacers. You guys should see it's impressive. I don't know how Chris does it because the 500 is the only race that he does. Well, the Grand Prix as well. So, for the rest of us, we know the cars and the colors because we're around it all year long. And they do change some of the color schemes, but I mean, for him, it's not second nature because he's not around it. But he brings this sheet. It's it's impressive, the stuff that he does. And I probably could learn from that sort of a preparation, right? Probably behoove me.
I feel like we're past that, don't you think?
Is that what you're going with? Okay.
At some point, we are what we are. I don't.
True words have never been spoken on this program.
I know it's the second half century of your life, but at some point, it's.
Eddie, did you get a hold of Matt, by the way?
Yeah, he's at 2:30 today.
Matt Verderame. Are we going to talk nothing but Taco Bell and Club Applebee's?
Well, much like Rob Perez, which has been our theme to get the other side of the coin, Matt is a Knicks fan, albeit as we planned this out, I thought perhaps we'd get a 1-1 even series. There'd be a little bit more back and forth versus New York just throwing stuff at us, but here we are.
All right, well, we're going to talk to him just about an hour from now.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds.
So the Colts are getting set for rookie minicamp coming up at the end of the week, right? Wouldn't that be intimidating, do you think? Do you remember, let me ask you this, Jimmy. Give me a new stage of your life that made you the most intimidated. Starting what was the area where you're like, you can still recall what it felt like?
Freshman orientation at Roncalli. They have all these seniors. It's before the school season starts. So it's probably like early August. They have all the seniors come out and greet you at the entrance, and your parents drop you off, and you go through a whole day of orientation, but they're all going nuts for you, going crazy when you walk out. You're overwhelmed. You're just trying to stay in your lane to some extent. It's just still just recent 8th grader right off the assembly line. And then you walk through this big tunnel with all these seniors screaming at you. And then perhaps, not to name any names, but perhaps you just happen to get picked up by a senior, take it all the way back down to the start of said tunnel, and you have to walk it again.
Nice.
So
had you gone to a public school, you would have gone where? You lived in what township?
I probably would have gone to Southport.
Okay.
Argument could have been made for Franklin Central.
So you were right on that, on the southeast side. Okay. Totally agree. I remember in the 8th grade, as a matter of fact, What's today's date?
It is the 9th of May.
I kid you not. This has nothing to do with it. I vividly recall when I was in the 8th grade going to the same thing. You went to North Central for a day to tour the school. I mean, it was, we got like the afternoon out of school at Eastwood, and they took us over to North Central. And I remember being in the library and them telling us like the orientation of what to expect the next year when we were freshmen. And in the window of the library, like all the way across it, it said junior prom May 9th. So, and that would have been May 9th of, that would have been 87. So it would have been basically 37 years ago this week. But I can still recall the nervous energy because you didn't want everyone else to know that you were nervous, but you were. And, of course, at North Central, it was like, dude, you're going to get locked in lockers. And, and North Central was so big, like just trying to figure your way around it. And I can still remember the way things smelled, felt, all of it from that first semester of freshman year. I can still recall it. The same, I think, holds true for a lot of people in college. And now, can you imagine that has to be the feeling for NFL rookies? They don't want to say it, but you're getting together now. This is basically like summer chapter before school begins where you're getting together with your rookie class, and they're guys sometimes that you're competing against for positions, but at the same time, the only others that really truly know what you feel in that moment. But it all gets underway for them, what, tomorrow?
Yeah. I suppose the way it's a little different is that at least with rookie minicamp, in theory, outside of the coaching staff, it's your fellow rookies that are there.
Yeah.
Whereas you're not getting that same experience of the seniors, or in this case, all pro players or third-year players, whatever you have it, heckling you or anything like that. Like that real welcome to the NFL stuff happens once you get into the grind that is training camp and the prep for those preseason games. I would think there's probably still some uneasiness, you're right, but almost that maybe it's a little different because you're just there with your rookie class or your rookie draft class or the undrafted rookies, whereas you're not yet full on display with all the other players that have been there for years and years.
Now, the other thing going on in the world of sports, two other things that I wanted to touch on here because I know it's a very Pacers heavy day. Fever tonight, preseason opener. And I think people are genuinely excited for it. I'm kicking myself on this, Jimmy. I guess I can divulge this now if I didn't before. The day that it was announced that Caitlin Clark was going to forego her last year of eligibility at Iowa, I immediately thought, I'm buying Fever season tickets, and I will give some of them to, I'll go to games, but, I'll give my sister a ticket or two or, schools, that kind of thing. And then admittedly, I thought, hell, I'll sell a couple of them, right? But if you look at the secondary market, what I find interesting, there is definitely buzz about Caitlin Clark playing for the Fever. No question. And I think it's great that they may sell out. It's going to be.
Road games are moving to bigger venues.
Totally.
Like,
It's
you've already
crazy,
seen it.
right?
Yes.
They're going to chartered flights now.
Well, they have to do that, right? Because just the security and everything else. But what's interesting to me, if you go on, like for tonight, if you go, and it's a preseason, so maybe that's, Eddie, which game is their season opener?
The one that starts the season?
Yeah.
May 16th.
Thanks. Well played.
May 16th against
May
the Liberty.
16th, okay.
That's their home. It's their home opener. Sorry to clarify that. May 14th is their first game.
So May 16th, their home opener. Tickets are going in the upper level at $22. But if you look on the secondary market, there are tickets available in every single section, which makes me wonder how many people that bought tickets are bought them just strictly to see if they could resell them. But the ticket prices for like the lower bowl are, $120 a piece, and those are face valued probably $50. But there are so many of them available. I wonder if it's not going to go up in smoke for people in the secondary market.
Look, I will be, since you had your open moment there, I'll confess too, though I wasn't able to do it because I just life got in the way. And then by the time I wanted to do it, it was too expensive. I had a similar thought. It's hard not to look at it to say, hey, go get season tickets, go to some games, but then see.
Right.
And a lot of people do that a lot of people do that across sport. Like you'll see people get Pacers season tickets.
Done it with Clemson.
And when the Lakers come into town.
I've done it with Clemson because I know I'm going to go to 2 or 3 games, but I can't go to all of them, obviously.
Sure.
And if they've got Florida State or Notre Dame on the schedule,
sure. There you go.
Pays for my year, right?
Pays for the year. So I too thought about doing that. I did not ultimately end up executing it, but it would surprise me if that did happen because you're going to bank on there being some market for it because of all the Iowa fans I think that will be coming to games throughout the year and the internal interest of this is a superstar player in your backyard and you want to go see it.
Leads to subject number 3 in terms of demand in sports. And what I'm about to ask, I'm going to say facetiously, okay?
Fair enough.
For background, there was a time in Indianapolis where this town had 2 baseball franchises, for example. You had the Indianapolis Clowns, you had the Indianapolis ABCs. The ABCs were named that because they were owned by the American Beverage Company, I believe was the name of it. Both were Negro League teams. Oscar Charleston played for the ABCs. The Clowns became more of almost like a vaudeville team, but they were both barnstorming teams based in Indianapolis. The Clowns is where Henry Aaron signed his first contract. There are cities in the United States, obviously, that have 2 teams in the same professional sport. Goes without saying. Matter of fact, what would be and I'm thinking off the top of my head, I should have researched this ahead of time, what would be the smallest market in the United States that has 2 teams in the same sport in their area? I mean, obviously Chicago, New York, Los Angeles.
Florida? If you're granting the whole state?
Well, no, but I'm talking about in a city.
Oh, in a specific city.
What
okay.
city? What city is the smallest city that has 2 pro sports competing franchises within the same sport? I mean, the Bay Area would have been, to an extent, if you consider Oakland, San Francisco the same thing. But obviously now they don't. They do in the NFL. But regardless,
would it be? Because I'm gonna show ignorance here. I would assume if I'm ranking it in terms of like masses of humanity there, the top that come to mind would be the top that come to mind would be the Texas area, the New York area, the LA area, and Chicago. And I would think Chicago would be the smallest of.
Texas and New York are states, and Chicago's a city.
Okay, so I guess are you counting?
I'm saying
what are you defining as that? You're counting the Bronx and Queens as all of New York City,
yeah,
correct?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so that would be a section. Then you would have LA with the Clippers and the Lakers.
Right, that's what I said, yeah.
And then the White Sox and the Cubs in Chicago.
Right. So outside of New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, what is the largest city in the United States that has competing sports franchises within the same league?
I do not know.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I thought it was a trivia question.
No.
Over here.
Here's why I ask. And I'm saying it facetiously. Could we be moving towards Indianapolis having 2 professional soccer teams competing for the same market share in Indianapolis? The reason I say it, we now know that the Indy 11 and this split from the city, the ownership group of the Indy 11 and the investment group for the Indy 11, which is building the Diamond Chain area, and there have been all kinds of problems with that. They now have another investor from Fort Wayne, a billionaire entrepreneur from Fort Wayne, who is interested in investing and partnering with the Indy 11, according to the Indy 11. So to give background for what has happened here, the Indy 11, which began in minor league soccer and owned by Ursal Özdemir, who is the owner of Keystone Construction Group, from the time that they have come to Indianapolis and become a viable partner not only for soccer in Indianapolis, but they've invested in different various levels of youth soccer and Grand Park and other such things. They have been a good partner for the sport of soccer in the United States. But when they opted to build a stadium and complex on the Diamond Chain location just to the west of downtown, there were a lot of questions. And part of those questions, and I don't pretend by any stretch of the imagination to be a real estate expert or any of that, but I had my own questions about it for a couple of reasons. Number one, because the complex they were going to build was going to include a very highly populated residential and retail complex around the stadium. Well, we're downtown Indianapolis right now, and I can go point you to like 15 different major facilities that are available for retail space. I mean, there's another restaurant that's getting ready to leave town. There's all kinds of retail space down here that they can't fill. There's also residential that can't be filled. Fact, in downtown Indianapolis. I don't know that we need more at this point. We need to fill what is vacant. But I can appreciate the forward thinking. The Diamond Chain area was an area of problem, not only because did you have like the economic aspect of the fact that the Diamond Chain, the former tenant, is gone, and supposedly like oil or different things that were left behind from the work that they did, but it was also on the site of the Green Lawn Cemetery, which was the largest African-American and, for lack of a better phrase, pauper cemetery of Indianapolis of the late 19th and early 20th century. So it was essentially a mass grave. I know that they had moved a lot of that to Crown Hill in mass, but they still were finding human remains during the building process, which then delays any building. So the city of Indianapolis, during All-Star Weekend, Joe Hogsett, the mayor of Indianapolis, met with investors that were interested in the MLS or talked about the MLS coming to Indianapolis, independent of the plan of the Indy 11 trying to parlay their area into an MLS bid. So the city, as I understand it, now don't quote me as fact here, but I'm comfortable enough to say that I certainly have heard this in numerous places now, that the brass of Indianapolis met with, if not directly the brass of the MLS, intermediary parties representing the MLS, and were given indication that from the MLS standpoint, Indianapolis's admittance into the MLS via an expansion or, in the smaller possibility, relocation, but more likely expansion, was more likely to be accepted and embraced by the MLS if the city of Indianapolis found an investment group different than that involved with the Indy 11. I'm not saying that's right or wrong in terms of their thought process. I'm not saying it's just or unjust. I'm simply telling you I've been told now from numerous people that Indianapolis got indication that their best chance of the MLS awarding them a franchise would be if it was done with a different route and path than linking themselves to the group involved with the Indy 11. And that's why Indianapolis decided to go in another direction, because they had nothing in ink that linked them legally moving forward to the Indy 11 group. So they opted to go in another direction, which was facilitated by other sports people in Indianapolis, giving them names of people that would potentially be able to come up with money in a much faster and much more secure path towards building a stadium just across from Gainbridge Fieldhouse that would allow a faster and more secure and more welcomed path from the MLS standpoint for Indianapolis having a franchise. But the Indy 11, now that they have a new investor, says they are going to proceed as planned with their stadium. And it's like, well, what do you know? Could we actually end up with, I can't imagine the Indy 11 being a viable product if there is an MLS team in town.
There's been 4 instances, and this is from Axios Indianapolis, there's been 4 other cities that had USL, that's where the Indy 11 play, USL squads before securing MLS expansion teams in recent years. None of those teams, none of those USL teams are still playing because in 2 instances, USL club in Cincinnati and Nashville transitioned to MLS, which is what Indy 11 would hope to do if somehow that could be salvaged. In two other cities, St. Louis and San Diego, it was a similar situation where a different team, a different ownership group, got MLS stamp of approval, and in St. Louis and San Diego, the USL team folded. You've seen it time and time again through this model of expansion to the MLS, to the point that my answer to your question, Jake, would be if an MLS team comes up from different ownership and the Indy 11 are an existing entity, they will eventually be cannibalized and be forced to fold.
You would have to think, right? You would have to think.
Especially if they're footing the bill for $1 billion stadium or whatever it is.
$1 billion stadium, by the way.
Yeah.
$1 billion. I will tell you that when I do the IndyCar St. Pete race, I call it from across from Al Lang Stadium. Al Lang Stadium is basically the Tampa St. Pete equivalent of Busch Stadium on 16th Street. It was built in, I think, 1956. It's basically just a concrete old minor league baseball stadium that now is the home of the Tampa Rowdies, which play in the same league as the Indy 11, who need $1 billion stadium.
This is Robert with Kirby Heating and Air. No job is too big or
We should do a segment on this program where, and listen, I've done radio shows before where we'd go to a commercial break and then nobody that was on the show talked to one another, ever, right? Derek Schultz and I, like 10 years of doing radio together, I've talked to the guy 5 times when we're not on the microphone. And usually it's, can you give me a ride? My car's in the shop. We should do a segment on this program, the best of the commercial breaks of our executive producer Todd Myers' brain droppings when he comes in the studio.
Oh no, that all of it's terrible.
None of it's terrible. It would have to be a Netflix behind the scenes thing, right?
There would have to be a lot of redactions in there.
I mean, and here's the other thing. Do you have the dump button sounder, right? Isn't it like a horn or something like that?
No. You didn't have a sounder for that one.
No, when you hit the dump button when somebody says a no-no, the people at home, I think, hear like, wah, 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 wah. That's what it used to sound, right?
In the 50s?
No. I'm telling you. Like when the Robin Miller dump button, the honorary Robin Miller dump button, when J&V used to have to hit it when Robin Miller would say something, if you were listening at home, that's what went over the air. It's not just like a delay, like you hear a sound effect. I'm sure of it.
To be clear, I obviously couldn't help but get the crack in there, but I'm not questioning your radio history knowledge. I just think in what our system operates.
Eddie just rolled his eyes at that. You just said that, and Eddie rolled his eyes. Did you say? I saw that. What Eddie doesn't realize with the size of his cranium is that when he rolls his eyes, it's actually the look that most people do when they like have their mouth agape. You rolled your eyes. He said my knowledge, and you rolled your eyes. I saw it. Clear as day, I saw that.
I wasn't even paying attention, so I didn't know I rolled my eyes.
Well, that's not a shock, but I'm telling you, you rolled your eyes.
Anyway, I don't think our modern dump button does that. I think it's just
Oh, really?
It skips ahead to whatever's. It gets rid of the delay.
It's just silent for 7 seconds?
No, I think it's 7 seconds behind what we're saying.
It's like if you edited an audio file, just
it would
erased.
jump to the end of, and let's say I said 6 words there. Sentence.
Well, then it's got to catch it. It's got to fall back again. If it skips forward 7 seconds, it's got to fall back.
Yeah, I don't understand how that tech works. It's been explained to me 6 times, and I still don't understand.
This is way above my level of comprehension, my level of understanding. I didn't know that. So there's no sound effect anymore?
To the best of my knowledge, there's not.
Eddie, did you say we have stuff to give away today, by the way?
Yes, Jake.
Thank you. Can you rehash for me what it is that we have to give away?
We have Carb Day tickets and IMS Quals tickets for the 500.
Now, are those, just out of curiosity, so qualifications for the Indianapolis 500-mile race, that is next weekend, by the way.
Yes.
And then Carb Day tickets, which will be a week from Friday, is that right?
So
No, 2 weeks from Friday.
Correct. 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Okay. Now, are these 2 separate giveaways or
all together?
All together. And we have how many to give away?
1 pair.
1 pair. And we're going to do that how?
At the top of the hour.
Are we going to do trivia with that?
Well, we've got the time, so yeah, why not?
We've got the time. Listen, folks, I'm not going to lie to you. What you're listening to here is a professional radio broadcast, okay? And we talked about the Pacers for an hour, and then we tapped that out. And so, we're like, you know what? We got the time now. What the hell? Let's just do that. What we're going to do for the next 30 minutes is just give stuff away. We've got dump buttons.
It was either that or this would have been tough for the audio audience. Eddie was going to just juggle all of his hats that he has. And it was going to be a feat unlike anything anybody's seen.
Eddie wears many hats at this station, all of them 9.5. Okay, so on the other side, are we doing trivia for this? Are we doing Indy 500 trivia for this? Or are we doing show trivia for this?
I say we stick with the show trivia, and then next week, I believe we have stuff to give away, so we will do 500 trivia next week.
Okay, so show trivia is what we are doing next. By the way, everybody is telling me that I'm correct about the dump button. Everybody is telling me I'm correct.
Modern button or current?
Two people do not count as
When's
everybody.
the last time somebody got on here and started swearing?
Chris Ballard.
What day is it?
Oh, sorry. Matt Gonzalez last week on the wake-up call. Dropped an F-bomb, yeah.
Did he really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well,
very fitting, though.
Shame on him, right?
For how his call went.
I don't remember who it was, but somebody did over our All-Star Weekend interviews. I just can't remember who it was. But we at least used it once. Maybe it was the Purdue run.
Brad Miller?
Together. Could have been that. Yeah.
It was Brad Miller.
Yep. But we had him on for both, right?
Yeah, but I only hit the dump button once.
Well, the problem with Brad Miller when we had him on is if it erases 7 seconds of the conversation, by the end of it, we had 14 seconds of conversation with Brad Miller on the air.
By the way, somebody just tweeted at all 3 of us have never heard of this wah, wah, wah in ages.
in ages.
That
Ages.
admits
Well, they
though
haven't
that
been
it
listening in
existed, though.
ages.
That admits it existed though. For one of us that might have rolled eyes about Jake's knowledge, that would imply it existed if you haven't heard of it in ages. For
Right
one of
here,
us.
Jake. Yes, I remember that. You're exactly correct. Thank you, Jake. Once again, you seem to be always correct. You are never wrong. I'm amazed at all times at how
I don't buy that
awesomely
one.
correct
I
you
don't
are.
buy that's real
Your
text.
memory is
Oh,
incredible.
my gosh.
What is your IQ? Your intellect is amazing. Thank you.
Why Shannon text you during the show?
Shannon wouldn't speak that nicely.
P.S. When does J&B come on? Wait a minute. We'll come back. We'll do the giveaway next.
Roto-Rooter. Plumbing problem? No matter. This band will be playing at Carb Day. You can see them. We have tickets to give away coming up in just a second here. Before we do that, though, Eddie, do you happen to have the breaking news sounder? This on X Twitter from Shams Charania, who is pretty much gospel when it comes to the NBA, correct?
Yes.
The National Basketball Association has suspended Bucks guard Patrick Beverley for 4 games.
Woo!
Now, I don't know. What I don't know is this.
Top comment. How can the NBA suspend someone who'll be playing in China next season?
I mean,
I didn't say that. That was on Twitter. I didn't say it.
That is a very fair question. The question that I have, and I don't know that this has been necessarily clarified, is the suspension for the throwing of the basketball to a fan or for the refusing to talk to an ESPN reporter because she didn't subscribe to his podcast.
Which time on the throwing of the basketball, by the way?
True. Because I will tell you this.
The time where he decked the lady, or the time that he asked for the ball back and then decked the guy that gave it back to him?
Right. I mean, honestly. And the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department is looking into that as well, by the way.
Yep.
So we have tickets to give away. Sometimes I like to do this just because it's fun to talk to the people that listen to this program.
Based on the statement from the NBA, I'm sorry to undercut the ticket giveaway, but last thing before we do that, it was announced today by Joe Dumars, Executive Vice President, Head of Basketball Operations, that Beverly's actions took place during and after the Bucks 120-98 lost to the Indiana Pacers in Game 6. So the during and after, during would be the throwing of the basketballs. I would assume after is the allusion to his conduct in the media scrum, based on that.
So throw a basketball directly into the...
That's how I read that. I'm not saying that's what it is.
Throwing a basketball directly into the face of a fan gets you 4 games, but punching a fan that comes onto the floor when all hell breaks loose in Detroit gets you the rest of the year.
That is why I hinted at Joe Dumars, Executive Vice President of Basketball.
All right, which one are we going with here, Eddie?
I'll let Jimmy pick today. Give a number, and I'll let you know who it is.
5.
5? Matt.
Matt, how are you?
Good, Jake. How are you?
Good. Can we play a little get to know your listener, Matt? We've had a lot of success with this over the years, and our research says that kids in particular love it. Are you willing to participate?
I'd love to.
Okay. Matt, how old a fella are you?
I'm 52.
52-year-old Matt. You okay? And so you were a graduate in high school of 90, 91, somewhere in there?
89.
89, okay. And when you were a senior in high school and you went to the football game and your team was getting ready to score and you had to shout out, "Let's go," Eagles, Tigers, whatever. You were shouting out what nickname?
Crusaders.
Crusaders, okay. So that would be, is that Cecina, is that right?
You are correct.
Okay. Do you know Paul Hurley, Paul the mailman, by chance?
I do. I'm Photo Matt, the other postman.
Oh, and Photo Matt, you do, if I'm not mistaken, you do Tales from the Route, right, where you talk about the wild and crazy things you see while delivering the mail. Is that right?
I have done that in the past, yes.
What's the craziest thing that you've seen? And do you get offended when people say they go postal? Does that offend you?
It's not such a thing anymore, but it was back in the day.
Okay. Now, what's the craziest thing you've ever seen while delivering the mail?
Well, I had to skip a couple houses because of domestics, maybe like a machete being used.
Okay. So you're just trying to get some guy his Pottery Barn catalog, and he comes out with a machete?
Yeah, half clothed. Yeah.
Okay. That does seem to be alarming.
Do you always deliver packages in Mad Max movies, or no? Is that just...
Well, this was a wife or girlfriend going after the husband. So I don't know what.
Wow. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Matt, just out of curiosity, do you get to take the little Jeep home?
I do not.
Okay. Which of the three of us would you like? How are we going to do this, Eddie? Are we doing show trivia?
Yes.
Okay. Matt, you get to pick one of the three of us. That would be myself, Jake speaking, Jimmy, or Eddie. Whichever you pick will give you a trivia question either about the show or about one of the three of us to prove that you have been a listener of the program. Which would you choose as the person giving you the question?
I would choose Jake, but I would have to say I love the chemistry of the show and listen to it when I can. So.
Okay, well, much appreciated. So you're picking me, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, Matt. How long have you listened to this show, Matt?
The show in particular?
Yeah, this particular installment of the show, how long have you been a listener of Query and Company?
Pretty much since the beginning.
Okay, here we go, Matt. Here is your trivia question.
Okay.
Your trivia question is simply this. Jimmy recently went on a vacation. All three of us have taken a vacation since the creation of this program. But Jimmy went on one where he brought back a gift for Eddie and myself. Can you tell us either where Jimmy went on vacation or what gift he brought back?
Oh, let's see here. I know one of you. Was it Seattle?
That was me.
You have to identify yourself, I feel like.
That was not Jimmy, then.
Correct. It was Eddie that just spoke, just to clarify.
Where did Jimmy go?
Would have been back in December.
This is some major recall.
All right, here we go. You got 5 seconds, Matt, before we got to move along to somebody else, even though I hate doing so.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just say Hawaii.
Hawaii, okay. No, actually, that was the Bradys that went there, not Jimmy. But, Matt, we will see you at the Speedway soon. I know you're out there a lot. I love Matt. Great dude. Appreciate you calling in. Who is next on this?
We'll go with Zach.
Zach, how are you?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good. Have you called the program before, Zach?
Yes, spasmodically. I mean, I have to work during the day, but I certainly have you on.
Now, is this Zach from my gym? Is it that, Zach?
It is.
Now, last time, Zach, that you called in, I believe that you called me out and said that I don't work out at the gym. I just sit and talk to people in the cafe. Was that you that called in?
You know what? I've noticed that you have been bulking up, to be honest.
Now, when you say bulking up, do you mean that I'm getting shredded, or do you mean that I'm becoming a portly fellow?
I'm talking about built, dude.
Well, Zach, congratulations on winning the tickets. No, I'm just kidding. All right, Zach, everything going okay in your world?
You know what? I can't complain at 70 years old.
Well, Zach, I like that, man. I like that. You just cruising around on that boat out on Geist and living the high life. All right, which of the three of us would you like to give a trivia question for you, or you can opt for the question that Matt did not answer?
I would opt for Indy trivia, but I have to take what I'm getting. So
I'll give you an that.
Beautiful.
All right, you ready? There is only one man in the history of the Indianapolis 500 to have won the race while turning the fastest lap of the race he won, and he did it on lap number 200. Only one guy has ever won the Indianapolis 500 and afterwards said, I won the race because I turned the fastest lap of the race on the last lap of the race. What winner who passed Kevin Cogan on lap 199 am I talking about?
It would be Bobby Rahal.
Bobby Rahal is correct, Zach. Nice. Zach, you are on your way to qualifications and Carb Day. Eddie will get all of your information. That is impressive that he'd know that. 1986 is correct. That was the year, of course, on ABC when they were getting ready for a restart, and they went live to Kevin Cogan in his car. Kevin, Sam Posey, how are you? And he said, Sam, I'm a little busy right now. And then they went green, and Bobby Rahal, right past him, fastest lap of the race in 1986. That was impressive. Very impressive. Jimmy, you knew the answer to that, right?
Of course, yeah. Yes, considering that it was 9 years before I arrived on this
Now,
plane.
the other thing that I'd like to give a glimpse behind the curtain, and we'll get more into Pacers-Knicks here coming up just about 15 minutes from now. During the segments of this program when we are in commercial break, and I'm not calling you out by any stretch on this, but you've asked me a few questions lately about the track, which I can appreciate, and I appreciate your enthusiasm for it. But you've asked me 47 times in 3 days about parking, for example, which is always a bit of a trick. I get that.
I don't do well in high-stress parking or leaving situations. I do not. My wife can attest to that.
Really?
I don't have the patience for it. I don't.
Are you a good parallel parker?
Yes.
Okay.
Just leaving events and getting to events. Don't do well with it.
So I'd like to know for you, Jimmy, what other things about the upcoming next week or so in building up to the Indianapolis 500 are you most intrigued by, confused by, anything? No judgment whatsoever, okay, because I think you represent the vast majority of our listening audience as somebody who is very familiar with the race, but not necessarily everyday, day-to-day entrenched in it.
What am I judging next week? Because I get a lot of it is getting the car right and getting everything ready for the weekend, which is quals next
Correct.
Weekend, but why shouldn't one, maybe not me, because I'm excited to be out there, I'm not going to do this, but why should one look at next week and say, it doesn't really matter until the weekend?
Okay, good question. So in practice, there are two things that happen over the course of practice that you look out for, okay? And a lot of people don't realize this, and it's a really good point that you bring up. And I'm offering this I'm offering this because I want people to get a better feel for, and I think there's a really good way of doing it, to get a better feel for or understanding of what takes place in terms of build-up for the Indy 500. When you are a driver of the race and you have your car, okay, there are two ways that there are two different cars essentially. It's the same car, but the way in which you set up your car, and by setup I mean The front wings of the car, you can change the angles of them, okay? The weight distribution of the car and where you put, there are little jackers that they can move around and manipulate the weight and the balance of their car. The amount of fuel they have in the car and how heavy it gets, whether it's got a full tank or a half tank, whatever it might be, tire pressure, etc. All of those things, tire pressure is the same, but all of those things go into setting up your car for one of two things. When you go out for qualifying, you're the only car on the racetrack. The cars have what's called downforce in them. And downforce, for lack of a better term, Jimmy, what that means is when you're going really, really fast, you want your car feeling as safe as possible, right? Like when you're taking a turn, when you're in your regular car and you take a turn, and all of a sudden, like you get that, everybody has it happen at some point where all of a sudden for a split second, you feel like you just lost control of your car. You're like, oh my gosh. And your car is about to get away from you, and you don't let anybody in the car know that you just had that feeling on the interstate or whatever it might be. So race cars are set up with what's called downforce to cause it to stick to the track so that the driver has more security and safety in where and how he's driving it, okay? The more downforce you put in the car, the harder it is to go super fast. So in order to become really, really fast, they do what's called trimming out the car, taking out that downforce. And what happens when you do that is the car has more ability to kind of slide all over the place, and you're right on the razor's edge of losing control of it. But that's not as big an issue when there's no one else on the track because you don't have air literally bouncing off of their car. Like when you're on the interstate and you get next to a semi and you feel your car kind of move a little bit, that doesn't happen when you're by yourself on the track. So you can take out all of that downforce and find out just exactly how fast you can go, and you take it right to the razor's edge where you're right on the edge of losing control of your car, but getting as much speed out of it as possible for your qualifying time. The other thing that happens is you find out how good your car feels when there are 32 other cars around it, and therefore you have to put downforce in it, but still allow yourself to feel speed. And the cars that you look at to say they have the best chance of winning the race are those that not only have that speed when they take that downforce out and they can qualify towards the front, but then once they put all the downforce back in it to make it feel safer, it still has the ability to have good speed. How is it in traffic is the big question. So when you're watching practice and you see a guy and you say, or gal, and you're like, that car looks really, holy cow, look at the speeds. Well, is that speed coming because they are getting aerodynamic assisting and other such things that are falsifying how fast they are? Or are they working on race setup, or are they working on trimming it out for qualifying and everybody else is still has downforce in it? So are the speeds a little bit false? False is the wrong word. But in other words, if you and I are going out on the track together and I'm setting my car up for qualifying, and all of a sudden I turn a lap and you go, whoa, he's like 2.5 miles an hour faster than Jimmy is. Well, it's because you're setting up your car with a bunch of downforce to get yourself ready for the race. Two different cars. So that's what you look for during the course of practice is who's working on the different setups, and then what is their fuel efficiency. A lot of times you'll be out there at practice and you'll be like, some guy just ran out of fuel on the backstretch. What a moron. Well, it's by design, because what they're doing is they're saying, okay, we're going to send you out and just have you turn as many laps as possible to run that bad boy dry so that we know how many laps we can do with a fuel tank. So there are different things going on that you think when you look at it, you don't realize the strategy that's coming into play with it. But it's a good question, because you think to yourself, so they're just going to go out and turn laps all afternoon? That's boring. But then when you start to analyze what they're doing, then you start to have a better understanding of the different feels. The other thing that comes into play, it might be 85 degrees and sunny and hot and sticky and humid outside, and they look at the forecast and they're like, it's supposed to be 60 the rest of the week. Well, on race day, it might be 85 and sunny. So now you got to go out and turn as many laps as possible, or vice versa, right? And the different aspects that go into it.
Is there a point in the week where you look at what a specific team is doing with a car and realize, they don't have it, or they are further behind than they should be?
Totally great question. And it's the same as the NFL season, okay? In the NFL season, like I always say to you when we talk about the NFL, it's a 17-week season. What week in the season do you have a pretty good idea? Gosh, you know what? Maybe these guys actually are pretty good. Or maybe this team just didn't in with it. There's always a team, Jimmy, to your point, there's always a team that just misses it. That whatever telemetry and data they had from last year just doesn't transfer over, and they're completely out to lunch. It was last year that team was Rahal's team, and Graham Rahal got bumped out of the show because they just, for whatever reason, the stuff that they'd worked on just did not translate to the weather conditions or whatever it might be that particular week, and they were completely left wondering. They're like Mike Damone. I woke up in a great mood. No, what the hell happened? All of a sudden, they miss it. So if somebody's off by Friday and they're still not finding speed on Fast Friday, when all of a sudden the extra boost is there and everyone's working on qualifying setup, on Friday afternoon, if somebody still doesn't have speed in the car, there's concern. But a lot of times, if it's a multi-car team, we'll just take, for example, Ganassi Racing. They have Alex Palou, they have Scott Dixon, they have Kiffin Simpson, okay? With that team, and they have Linus Lundqvist. So 4 cars. If one of those 4 is way off pace, but the other 3 are fast, then probably what that tells you is one of those 4 drivers, they said to them, we're going to work on some totally out of left field alternate experimental strategy, and if you don't have speed in your car, we'll just put on it what we did for the other 3, so don't get overly worried about it. But if all 4 cars are off pace, they got a problem. But if as long as there's 1 car or 2 cars within a team that is performing at a high level, then they're going to put that all in there, right, and be good to go. But Friday afternoon is, like, if you're a fan of whatever, Ganassi Racing, and all 4 of their cars are still grossly underperforming by Friday of practice, then that means that there is cause for concern. But, and I know that probably is like, I hope that's not a boring conversation to people, but I think it does give perspective because it is different than it used to be. And I think that for a lot of people, understanding what's going on makes it more exciting and makes it more fun. And it's like me with soccer, quite frankly. We could have the same conversation about soccer where I'd be asking you, like, why are they just running around? Like, what is going on? Sure. And you're like, well, Jake, you got to see the play develop. Sure. There's a strategy to it. There's a defender. There's wing players. But I find it routine because I don't have the understanding of it yet. And if I did, I think I'd like it. Why are you wearing a USA shirt? Is that a soccer shirt?
It actually, I think
all of your shirts have a theme, I've noticed.
Yeah. I didn't have a proper theme shirt today, so I just went with the old Nike USA.
Eddie, how long have we done this show together?
Hold on. Let me look up the exact date.
It was August 8th. Is that right?
First installment, August 21st.
August 21st. So if August 21st was our first show, okay, and then so that's August 21st, and this is May 9th. So we're looking at 9 months now, right? Basically 9 months. So in 9 months, each month we do how many shows per month? 20 per, so the 180.
Yeah.
And then I took some vacation days, so we'll take that down to 170. You took vacation days, and we factor in your vacation days now. We're down to 110.
All right,
okay,
so I've got the number here.
The total number of shows we've done?
So Querying Company has had 158 shows total.
158, and how many of those have all 3 of us been in attendance?
So Jimmy, oh boy, I didn't even factor in myself for missing time, but
well, then if we do that, then now we're down to Jake 74.
I have you missing 5 shows since
how about that?
The 21st.
Okay.
I have Jimmy missing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Okay, so 147. Okay, so basically, let's say 145 if there's a couple where Eddie might have missed it.
Yeah.
What we now know, Eddie, is that Jimmy's T-shirt allotment is 145 T-shirts because there's a theme for every one of them.
Okay.
But now, after 145, he's run out of themes.
Do you want an explanation? Here's an explanation for you. I would have loved to have.
I know what it is. You had a Canadian quarter and you couldn't get it in the laundry machine.
It's true. No, no issues at the laundromat. I would have loved to have been representing after 2 consecutive wins over the Houston Astros by my beloved New York Yankees, but I don't want to be touting anything New York related during this series. Try my best to not do that. So that limits the wardrobe a bit during the springtime, other than a regular polo. So I wore Team USA.
I like that.
But I thought about bringing out the Yankee shirt, but no, we're not with New York right now. We're on the Pacers side of
that.
things.
See, now that's the kind of loyalty I'm looking for here, right?
Exactly.
Now, do we still have 2 callers that are hoping to win tickets? Is that what we're doing, Eddie?
Yeah.
But we don't have tickets to give away for them, right?
Negative.
So these fellas are just sitting around aimlessly? I want to incorporate them in the program because I appreciate their loyalty.
That was actually the working title of this show before they settled on Querying Company, was guys working around aimlessly. It's too long. It didn't do well in focus
groups.
groups.
It's the theme of the program. All right, I'd like to talk to Justin. Can we get Justin on the line? Hi, Justin. How are you?
Hey, what's up?
Are you hanging around just because you thought you could win tickets or just because you were having so much fun listening on hold that you didn't want to hang up?
A little bit of both.
Okay. Justin, can we play Get to Know Your Listener with you real quick?
Yeah, that'd be great.
The first is, how long did it take to get to the bottom of that hole you're calling from?
I got my headphones on.
Okay. Are you at work, Justin?
Yeah.
What line of work are you in, Justin?
I do business-to-business sales for the Window Valet. It's a window treatment company.
Okay, the Window Valet, a window treatment company. This is Justin. Are you a native of Indianapolis, Justin?
I currently live there, but I was raised in Shelbyville, Indiana.
Oh, what year did you graduate from Shelbyville High School?
1994.
1994. So you knew like Chris Devitis, Chris Ewing. These guys are older than you. Chris Depry, Matt McNeely, Country Club Heights OGs. Did you know those guys?
I knew them all very well. They did a fair amount of hazing me when I was a child. I am a lot better friends with their younger brothers.
Okay, now just out of curiosity, did you ever go to Cow Palace?
Oh yeah. Mint chip.
Did you go to Rest? Did you go to Rest Preschool?
No, I went to La Petite.
Well, that's why you got hazed, Justin. Listen, if my parents hadn't moved from Country Club Heights when I was 5, I'd have been right there hazing you. But I appreciate the fact that you still listen to the program. Is that cool?
Yeah, no, it's great.
All right, Justin, I'll tell you what. We don't have anything else to give away, unfortunately, Eddie. Justin, call back tomorrow. Sorry to do that to you, but we will try to do a giveaway again tomorrow. When we come back, Matt Verderame loves Taco Bell, loves Club Applebee's, also loves the New York Knicks. We'll talk a little NFL with him, and we'll sprinkle in Pacers-Knicks conversation as well.
Safe Auto Insurance is now...
You've heard all these airwaves many a time, especially around the NFL season. He's one of the best, most in tune out there covering the National Football League. You can find his work on Sports Illustrated and on Twitter at SI Now. Of course, you can follow him directly on Twitter at Matt Verderame and subscribe on Patreon to the Matt Verderame Show. He is the aforementioned Matt Verderame. Matt, thanks again for making time for us as always. I'll be honest with you. We had on Rob Perez yesterday, another noted New York Knicks fan, and the thought was at least there might be a split at this stage in the series so that it would be less Knicks fans throwing stuff at us. But here we are. How are you feeling after probably the, most electric the Knicks have made you feel since the 90s?
I mean, I feel like I need to start smoking cigarettes. I tweeted out last night, I feel like if this goes on any longer in my hand, I'm going to look like I have a prairie fire in my hand. I can't. I mean, I don't smoke, but my God, they have not won one easy game yet. Like, they've won 6 games in the playoffs, and all of them have just induced a heart attack. So I'm enjoying it because of the end result, but I'm also having a stroke every night.
So, Matt, with that, do you think most New York fans feel the same? Like, in other words, how tense was Club Applebee's while you were watching?
Well, Club Applebee's wasn't too tense because most of those people, I'm guessing, were blacked out and face down. But listen, I would say most New Yorkers probably feel the way I do, I would think, which is just you can't help, if you're a Knicks fan, but be immensely proud of this team. Like, I spent the entire first round listening to national people talk about how hurt Joel Embiid is. And Joel Embiid was definitely hurt. Like, I'm not – absolutely. Like, he wasn't 100%. There's no question about that. But he was out there probably, 70%, something like that, 75%. The Knicks are without Mitchell Robinson mostly because Joel Embiid tried to kill him in Game 3 and didn't get thrown out of the game for it. They're without Bogdanovich, who got hurt 1 minute in Game 4. They're without Julius Randle and have been since January. Anunoby has been mostly out since they've acquired him. Now is out again with a hamstring injury. Brunson now has an injured foot. They're playing like half their team. So I think most New Yorkers are just really proud of them. Like, it's just one of these things where they have no business being in the position that they have no business beating Philadelphia.
And does it say more about New York or Indiana at this point? I mean, like, what is, in all honesty, and I'm not trying to, like, storm up some, crazy hot take, but what is the perception of Indiana, and are you surprised it's 2-0 based on everything you're talking about?
No, it's a fair question. I think going into the series, the majority of Knicks fans felt like they should win the series. Like, they just beat the Sixers, who haven't beaten Maxey, and I think the fear was with Indiana, like, Indy can score. And this is going to be a series where the Knicks are used to playing these slow-down games where they're going to grind you out and they're going to win, 108, 102. That is not the way the Pacers play. The Pacers are a tempo team. They can shoot the lights out. I think if Knicks fans never see T.J. McConnell for the rest of their lives, that'd be great. Luckily for Knicks fans, Rick Carlisle doesn't want to see him in the fourth quarter. So that's been lovely. But no, I think there's definitely a respect of them. I mean, they won 47 games, and between Siakam and Turner and Haliburton, and I know Haliburton wasn't himself in Game 1; he was great in Game 2. There's a healthy respect. I just feel like most Knicks fans felt like, if healthy to some degree in the series, they should find a way to win in 6-7 games. And so I was surprised last night. I thought once Brunson left the game, I was like, okay, they're just not going to be able to keep up, and they weren't. And then he came back, and the Pacers in the third quarter just couldn't do anything. I mean, that was really the story of the night for me.
Where does your mindset shift, if for the sake of argument? Because you're right, the injuries have piled up continually on New York, and now it's possible that OG Anunoby might miss Game 3, and where he's at after that, we'll wait and see. Let's take him off the board for Games 3 and 4. Okay. Where is the Knicks fans' mindset at if this is tied back, which is no guarantee, but if it's tied at 2 games apiece going back to the Garden next week?
If it's tied at 2 and they get Anunoby back, I think most Knicks fans think they'll still win the series, 6 or 7 games. I mean, I will say this, and really, I'm sure a lot of Pacers fans are listening to this like, oh, this is typical New Yorker. Like, look, it's really more to do about the Knicks and the heart of this team than it is anything to do with Indiana. Like, I firmly believe if they play Boston, like they win the series and they get to Boston, they're going to lose to them. I also believe there's a real world where this team somehow just drags themselves like Game 7 of that series because they just won't die. Like, DiVincenzo will have like 43 points in some random game in Boston. And, you know, Josh Hart will have like a quadruple double because he played 78 minutes. Like, that's what they've been. They've been like this all year long. If Anunoby misses these 2 games, I think the mentality would be, look, just try some way, somehow to split them. I mean, look, they're going to play 6 players if Anunoby doesn't play. I mean, it's going to be, you know, it's Chua and Hartenstein. It's going to be the 3 guards, and it's going to be Hart. I mean, that's it. They're not like Alec Burks. There's no way in hell he's playing. Thibodeau would rather put himself in the game than Alec Burks. So it's going to be 6 guys, and they're just going to ride it till the wheels fall off.
Matt, what's crazy to me is, and I want you to tell me if we're to put truth serum in you, not that you haven't been so far, but you know what I mean? Like, if as an Indiana perspective, you keep thinking like, this is going to have to like hit a wall here eventually, right? I mean, these guys are playing at an unbelievable pace with the amount of minutes they're logging. Reality is going to kick in eventually. That's the Indiana side standpoint. Do New York fans feel the same, or at this point is it like, hell, let's go?
There's a fear of that. I think you'd be lying if you said there wasn't a fear of it. But like, I'll give you guys a little like note to kind of give maybe the Knicks fans perspective on this. The last game of the regular season, a lot of people wanted the Knicks to lose because if the Knicks had lost, they played Chicago at home. The game meant nothing for the Bulls. They were locked into a play-in game. A lot of Knicks fans are like, lose the game because then you're going to drop down and you're going to play the Magic or the Cavs. I think it would have been Orlando. I believe that's what it would have been. The Knicks, I think, would have been the 4 seed. And it was like, then you avoid Philadelphia and so on and so forth. The Knicks played DiVincenzo 53 minutes in that game. Like, the Knicks just went all out and did everything possible to win that game because they just believe we're not going to tank. We're not going to duck anybody. We're going to – and there were games in the middle of the season. Like, we're talking like December, January, where Josh Hart played 47 minutes. That's just what they do. They do it all the time. Thibodeau just doesn't care about load management or worrying. I mean, they believe that if you are the best option, you're playing. And if you're not good enough to be out in the court, you're not going to play, even if it means benefiting somebody down the road physically. They don't care. So I think there's definitely a fear that like there could just come a breaking point here if they haven't already reached it. But they're so used to it. Like, if there's any team in the league that could play with 5 guys for 48 minutes apiece and be fine with it, it's the Knicks.
Matt, if you had your choice, one or the other. Matt Verderame's our guest from SI. He's on the always busy and shockingly unsponsored guest line. If you had your choice and a deal is made, the Knicks are going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. They're going to defeat Indiana. They're going to play Boston. They're going to beat Boston, and they're going to go to the NBA Finals. But in exchange, you never again in your lifetime are allowed to walk into Taco Bell Cantina. Do you make that deal?
That's not something I'm prepared to figure out over the radio in 30 seconds. You know what? I think I'd have to, and I'd have to just sit outside and get my enjoyment from the sidewalk. You know, make fun of people. Yeah, I mean, I've been a Knicks fan since '90. Well, I was 5 in 1993. But that was the first year I cared about him, and that was a nice indoctrination because I got to watch Charles Smith go up as soft as Charmin 3 different times because the ball just slammed back in his face. First time I ever saw my father start screaming at the television, but it was. I mean, it's been so many years of them just being awful. Like, I'm sure, look, if you're a fan of a team, any team that hasn't been good for a long time, like, the Knicks were not just bad. They were humiliating. Like, they were a national punchline. I mean, I remember literally, like, you turn on the first game of the season and watch it for 5 minutes because I'm done with this. Like, I don't even need to.
Yeah, but you at least got in at the Penthouse, right? I mean, if you started watching them in '93, then you saw obviously a finals appearance and the glory of the Pacers-Knicks and all that, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, listen, and that's truthfully like that's why the first team I ever loved growing up in any sport were the Knicks. I mean, I loved those teams and everything that came with it. I mean, that was so much fun, even though they didn't win a title. They were such a tough team. And I think, truthfully, that's why New York loves this team. This team is not unbelievably talented. They certainly have talent. Brunson's a tremendous player. But even him, like, if you look at Jalen Brunson, you don't physically look at him and go, man, that guy looks like LeBron or Giannis. Like, Jalen Brunson looks like a guy who you'd run into at the deli. Or Jalen Brunson, who maybe hoops at the Y sometimes.
Yeah, like T.J. McConnell, right?
Yeah, like a guy who you're like, how is this dude doing this? And I think as a New Yorker, like, you appreciate guys. Like Josh Hart, if they built the statue to him tonight outside MSG, New Yorkers would be like, that's great, he deserves it. There's a certain, it doesn't work when they bring in these glitzy guys. I know there's all this talk about, like, well, they bring in Durant in the offseason. I don't want Kevin Durant. And most Knicks fans don't want Kevin. Like, nothing against him. He's an unbelievable player. But everybody just loves this team because they play so hard and they're perfect for the coach. Like, that's the big fear with the Knicks is, like, if you bring in somebody who doesn't want to just go balls to the wall, not just in the playoffs, for 82 games, that guy can't play with the Knicks. That guy, like, he cannot walk into Madison Square Garden. It won't work. So it's finally, you have some pride being a Knicks fan for the first time since I was a kid watching this thing.
Real quick, yes or no on this. Did the Cantina story ever get published?
No, it got killed.
That's disappointing. Okay, if you happen to have any rough drafts that you feel like sneaking our way, we won't say they came from you, but I was looking forward to that.
For those that aren't familiar with what we're talking about, it happened during the NFL Combine, our conversation for the Taco Bell Cantina. So, Matt, real quick, can you summarize for people what got you so excited?
Yes, at the Combine, like, we all, as you're a reporter, we all go out. We have our certain spots to meet with NFL people, and I was staying on the Circle. And so I was walking back one night early in the week, saw a Taco Bell that was open, and it was like, that's great. Like, I could go for a soft taco here at 2:30 in the morning because I'm going to need one to just get myself ready for tomorrow. And walked in, and it was a full-service bar. Like, there was liquor, there were beer taps, there was a Liv Moss party deck in the back. And I was floored by this, as were the three guys who cover the Bills who were with me. And I decided on the spot, I'm going to write a column about this. I'm going to come back here every night. And I'm just going to detail what it's like to live Moss in Indianapolis at 2:30 in the morning during the week. And then started doing research, found out there's only I think there's 50 or 60 cantina Taco Bells in the whole country. Wrote the whole story. Editor loved it. By the way, I have a full copy of it on my computer. It was edited, the whole deal, and then was told at the last minute, like, look, powers that be are not willing to maybe go with this the way you wrote it. The good news is, my understanding is next year when I go back, I'm getting a photographer with me, and we're going to write it with photography. So buckle up. We're going to really do it. We're going to get it in the magazine.
Okay, I'm ready.
Now, did you partake in any of the beverages besides like a Baja Blast soft drink when you were there at 2:30 in the morning?
I didn't, because if I had, I probably wouldn't have been able to walk out of the cantina at that point. A lot of nights at Prime 47, I had more than enough. But I will tell you, I won't say who it was. We were there one night, and my buddy walked in, so I said, oh, my God. And he got two Modelo's. And he sat down with two draft Modelo's and like a Crunch Wrap Supreme and a bean burrito. And I saw something that night that I wrote about in great detail in that story. Unfortunately, never to be seen. But I sat down and had like a Baja Blast. I think literally, to your point. But it was just unbelievable. I remember like a cop walked in one night. I was sitting there talking to him. He's like, "Yeah, I love this place." It was incredible. There were NFL coaches in there one night. It was ridiculous, but it was the best story I've ever written that nobody's ever seen.
One sentence on what the Colts did in the 2024 draft, notably with Leatu Leatu.
I think it's a really good draft. I gave it a high grade, A-. I think Latu's a tremendous player, and I think Mitchell is awesome value in the second round.
When a team gets drafted with a high draft grade, is it because you like every player they took, or more so because you like the direction they took based on the holes that they filled?
Yeah, for me, it's a marriage of did they hit the needs that they have without aggressively reaching. And I thought Latu was a perfect fit for Indianapolis. I love the fit. And then Mitchell, they have downs, obviously brought back Pittman, but I thought they could use one more receiver. And I know a lot of people in the league who thought A.D. Mitchell was going to go in the 20s. So to nab him in the second round.
There was a question about Mitchell's. Chris Ballard was very defensive of questions about Mitchell's character. I had not heard what those are. What's the backstory there?
The funny thing is, I asked about that to a handful of people, and I never got a definitive answer. Like, there was nobody ever said to me, like, oh, it's because of this. I mean, you hear stuff like, well, did he take plays off? Was he a little bit lazy at times in terms of, if a play wasn't designed for him? But I got to tell you, you hear that about guys all the time. Like, you hear that about NFL guys who, those 15 routes, and he didn't really run that hard. I mean, it's not perfect. It's not great. And I can't tell you if that's true or not because I never sat down and burned the midnight oil watching the Longhorn film. But, you hear that a lot. I mean, that stuff, I never heard anything about his character. And to me, that's all I would care about.
He is Matt Verderame. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at Matt Verderame. Find his work, NFL staff writer for Sports Illustrated. And, of course, subscribe on Patreon to the Matt Verderame Show. Matt, always good talking to you. I'm sure we'll catch up as the offseason continues to roll on. And, again, you have our contact information. We won't tell anybody. If you happen to leak a draft or two of that Cantina story, we won't say no.
I'll happily do it. Hey, thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. It's Matt Verderame.
Love it. And by the way, Club Applebee's was the story he told. It was really funny about growing up near Long Island. And one of the Applebee's near where he grew up, they would turn it into a nightclub late at night, and he and his friends would sit in their car and watch the people going in and make fun of him. Just,
that commercial where the college team is looking for a place to eat late at night on the bus, and the Applebee's is closed, and they flip the sign to open for them, takes on a whole new meaning if there was a Club Applebee's there too.
Eddie, did you say that, speaking of A.D. Mitchell, did you say that you got a hold of him and he's going to join tomorrow?
Yes, that is correct. He will be on the airwaves with us tomorrow at 12:45.
And he, a native of Nashville, then played at Georgia and then transferred to Texas. Have you guys been to the Texas campus in Austin?
I've not, no.
No.
You?
For the first time a couple of years ago, and I actually was kind of disappointed because I just assumed that the University of Texas would be like this beautiful, huge, and I'm not saying it's not a nice campus, but it's more of an urban campus. Like it's right in downtown Austin, or right in the city of Austin. It's kind of like an IUP, just a sprawling. Michigan's kind of the same way. I've not been to East Lansing. Have you been to East Lansing?
No, I've not been to East Lansing.
Because I've not seen Michigan State's campus. It's one of the few Big Ten campuses I've not been on. But I would assume it's more of a true college campus, whereas University of Michigan is just kind of like a sprawling, building after building after building and buses going through it.
I think Northwestern, IU, obviously, because I went there, Purdue, and that might be the list of Big Ten campuses that I think actually seen and seen extensively.
Wisconsin's is cool.
I've been to Michigan State.
Is it cool?
It's like Washington's, but not in terms of like the size of it, but in terms of like how the buildings are. Like,
does it feel like a college campus though, or does it feel like you're in the middle of a city?
And Ohio State. So there you go. So those four.
It
Ohio
feels like
State,
a college
Northwestern,
campus. Yes.
Purdue, IU.
I think I've said this before. I'll say it again. I've just always thought Michigan State is where like the people in Michigan that are just like normal, like cool people go to Michigan State, and then like the kind of elitists go to Michigan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For what it's worth. We'll come back. We'll get Jimmy's plays and picks of the day next.
Royal Spa hot tubs are simply better.
Today's plays of the day. First in the NBA playoffs, we will take the Boston Celtics over 58.5 total points in the first half in Game 2 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Cleveland Cavaliers. A little bit later, the nightcap of that matchup, we will take Kyrie Irving of the Dallas Mavericks over 23.5 total points scored in the matchup tonight against the Thunder, that Game 2 of the Western Conference semifinals. One baseball bet today, we'll take the Cleveland Guardians to win on the money line outright in Chicago against the White Sox. Eddie, anything from you?
You know the best bet to make in that Dallas OKC game?
Give it to me.
Halftime, take Kyrie's over. He always has like...
So you're saying a live bet.
Yeah, he always has
Second
like
half.
4
All right.
points in the first half, 6 points, and then I think he's been averaging like near 20 the last 3 games in the second half, so...
That's
Give
your
some free
only
money.
nugget/play of the day?
Yeah.
All right. There are your plays of the day.
And tomorrow, again, if you are just joining us, where have you been?
Where have you been?
Thank you, Eddie. A.D. Mitchell that we just talked about, you said 12:45 tomorrow, is that right?
Correct. Adonai Mitchell at 12:45.
And he goes by 80 now, is that right? Can we ask him about that, which he prefers? Because there's a precedent of players that then change their name once they get drafted.
It's true. And either way, you want to be on the correct side. So good opportunity tomorrow. To
By the
potentially
way,
ask him that.
speaking of that, here's a dumb question. I'm almost embarrassed to ask it. It's such a dumb question. Is Shaq Leonard on a roster currently?
Nope.
Don't believe so.
What about Darius? Is he?
Nope.
Like how that just goes to show, not a knock on him. I mean, just how fickle and challenging the NFL can be, right?
It's a beast, man. It takes a special type of athlete to be able to have a long, healthy career.
Well, you
in
feel
that
for
league.
him because I think we can definitively say that it is injury that
Yes.
really did him
Yeah.
in. I mean, he was never the same. Went from being a really special playmaker to a good player. You know what I mean? But just never the same in general. So we are back at it tomorrow at noon. Again, A.D. Mitchell will join us at 12:45 tomorrow. Plenty of preview of the Pacers and Knicks in game number 3 at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Sancio Grand Prix taking place on Saturday. We will have more tickets for the Speedway to give away as well. J&V is next. Where's J&V, James?
Miss M's.
Miss M's?
Mhm.
That's on which side of town?
It's on the side of town.
It's on a side of town.
J&V is at Miss M's. So if you are near there.
It is located in Bargersville off of 135.
Bargersville and 135. You got time to stop by and see John. He'll be there until 6. He's up next. Thanks for listening to Aquarium Company.
The month of May is filled with traditions. Poll Day.